All right. I had asked this question earlier. Let me just confirm this. Can you guys hear me clearly? Let me put in clear all responses. Put in this poll question. Can you guys hear me clearly? Select yes if you can. Select no otherwise. Perfect. Pretty much most of you can hear me clearly. If you're one of those few folks who can't hear me clearly, I just recommend join again. If you're using a connection that is that uses a cellular device, then and usually when you join again, the problem does sort out by itself. Let's actually ask this question. What kind of internet are you guys using over here? Let's go over here. What kind of internet are you guys using? Is it a regular internet where there's a cable coming to your house and you have a Wi-Fi router that's distributing that internet from there? Or are you using a dongle which you've gotten from Verizon, Geo, or AT&T, or T-Mobile if you are in Europe, uh, or Vodafone, or if you, are you tethering using your cell phone's connection? So 80% of you say chose option one. If you've chosen option one, you should be fine during the session. We use very little bandwidth during this webinar, but we need a high quality connection, and a high quality connection is something that maintains I'd say, almost a real time kind of connection. But if you're using two or three, you might find that the connection does drop because any form of cellular internet is not designed to be real time. And hence, if that so happens, just join again. When you do that, you reset your connection. The problem does sort out by itself. With that, I want to thank you everyone for joining me today. In this webinar, we're going to really demonstrate how you can go from being a 30th to a 40th percentile student in GMAT RC to a 90th percentile student. We'll also prove to you that to excel in GMAT RC, you don't need to be a voracious reader. You don't need to be someone who's read ton of literature or so. We're going to talk about a few key reading strategies and a few good habits, both of which, if you follow, you're going to find that ace in GMAT RC actually becomes one of the simplest things on the verbal side of the GMAT. With that, let me introduce my team. My name is Rajas Sudana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today, or rather, I'm your co-host today. I'm used to saying main host because usually I host this session. Our main host today is Harsha, who's going to be hosting this session, and supporting Harsha, we'll have Shraddha. Both Harsha and Shraddha are senior subject matter experts at e-GMAT, and think they'll do a better job than I do with this particular session. Now, this is a fairly application-focused session, so to make sure that you guys are well prepped for it, we did send these two video lessons your way on Main Point. If you've not gone through these video lessons, they are a part of your free trial. As you log into your free account, to your e-GMAT account, you should be able to access these video lessons. With that, we also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free quant workshop that is tomorrow. Think of this workshop as a proctored mock test. Uh, when you go through this workshop, not only gives you an estimate of where you currently stand in GMAT Quant, but it also tells you which subsections do you need to work on. Do you need to work more on number properties and word problems versus algebra, geometry? It also tells you which habits of yours are stopping you from really getting to a Q49, Q50, Q51. Are you not inferring information from the question stem? Are you not considering all cases? Etc. etc. So if GMAT Quant's an area where you need help, definitely attend this workshop. You can register for this using the register now button. And for those of you who need to understand what does it take to get to that score of 740 or higher, we have this webinar next week, in which I host this webinar in which we talk about not only how do you get that personalized study plan to get to that 740, but how do you execute on it? What metrics do you track to ensure that you get there in a month, 2 months, or 3 months, depending on how much time you want to invest in. And we know a bit about helping people get to that score because no one in the last 5 years has delivered as many success stories as we have. Okay, with that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. I have about 165 students here in the webinar. I want to understand a few things. One is, when do you guys plan to take the test overall? And then the next thing is, what is your target GMAT score? Let's get in this poll question over here. What is your target GMAT score? Let's get a few more responses. Let me just do a couple of other things. All right. So with that, we have quite a few folks here, and you can really see the number over here. We have two kind of reasonably large segment. We have one segment where people have the test in 15 to 30 days. That's about 20% of you. And then we have the largest segment over here is where people have more than 60 days before their test. That's about 80 of you over here. Other than that, reasonable number of people in every segment. With regards to the target GMAT score, you can really see the most popular group is at 730 to 750. That's about 35% of you. And then we have about 25% in both 710, 720, and 760 or higher. And then about 18% of you are in that 610 to 600 to 700 bracket over here, 17%, give or take. Okay, with that, let me go right into the webinar pane. I'm going to actually hide the short on support. So now what you should be seeing is a presentation that says reading comprehension and then a Q&A pod below that. Since this is a free session, it's very heavily attended, and to make sure that we do justice to your time, as well as we provide as much of a personalized attention as we can, we kind of make sure that we have multiple experts with us in this session. So if you have a question during the session, please pose it in the Q&A pod. That way, Harsha can go through his session, and while you get a response from one of the other experts, so you do get your doubts answered as well. There's only one thing that we ask, that the questions that you pose are on the topics that are being discussed. That way, we stay on track. We finish the session on time. The session should end in about 2 hours from now. Now with that, I want to just spend about 10 minutes talking about why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher, or actually even higher today. I would rather say or higher right now. Why? Because we are arguably entering the most competitive application cycle. 2020 is supposed to be the most competitive application cycle of the last decade, and 2021 fall, I believe, is going to be more competitive than 2020. So why is it that the score of 700 is not enough anymore? Why? Because if you're aiming for top schools, which I'm sure most of you are, most top schools now require that score of 730. In fact, even with that, in this GMAT optional world, we have data right from round one which demonstrates the importance of GMAT. The second thing is, if you're interested in scholarships, B schools in the US give a lot of scholarship money, and a majority of it goes to people who get to that score over here. And then the third piece is probably the most ignored reason is the delta in total earnings over a 10-year period between someone who graduates from a tier 1 school versus someone who graduates from a tier 2 school. That's the highest that it has ever been over there. Here's some data to back those claims up. What you see is the trend of median GMAT scores, how they've moved from 2014 to 2018. You'd notice two things. One is there's no Harvard, no Stanford here. You know why? Because even in this year 2014, they were already there at that 730 score. And the second thing is there are certain schools such as Sloan and Columbia where 80% of the admitted class has a score of 700 or higher. Essentially, what these schools are saying is, if you don't have that score, don't bother applying. And this is despite the fact that there was a 15% decline in GMAT test taking population during these 5 years. In 2020, we have for the first time, we have an increase in the GMAT test taking population over here. And this is something that you've seen. If you're not applying to a top school, if you're applying to a tier 2 school, you've seen a similar trend over here where you can really see from that, 670, we are getting more towards that 700, that 30-point jump. You see that over here as well. And this is statistical data. We have anecdotal data as well. As an example of one of our former students, Nishant, who, scored a 690, was rejected by Tuck, Broad, and a bunch of other schools. Improved his score to a 740. Immediately, he received a full scholarship from Ohio Fisher and an admit with scholarship from Columbia. In fact, one of the benefits of applying to a school such as Tuck is that even when they reject you, they give you good feedback. And they said, Tuck told him, your candidacy is great, we just don't like your GMAT score, which kind of is why it's not a surprise that Once he improved his GMAT score, he got into Columbia as well as Fisher with a full ride. Pravi, again, very similar story. For her, she applied in round one with a 680 to a bunch of schools, didn't receive a single interview invite till the fag end. Now, remember, most schools announce their decisions by the first week of December or so. She'd not gotten an interview invite till the end of November. The moment she updated her GMAT score to a 740, she received 7 interview invites within 5 hours or so. Again, she got a bunch of admits. You can see the scholarships, and she eventually went to Kellogg. KK or Krishnakant, actually, we are hosting KK this Tuesday. Applied in round two with a 680, was rejected by every school he applied to in round two. Then he applied in round three with a 720, and he got 5 full fellowships, about upwards of $500,000 worth of full fellowships in round three, the most dreaded round over here. He's currently studying at Georgia Tech Scheller. He's going to talk about how he got there, how he secured an internship. It's been a year since he's been studying over there. So essentially, a GMAT score is way more important today than it has ever been. The second thing is scholarships. Some of you have been asking about scholarships over here. So so when you think about scholarship, US B schools give out about 70% of all scholarships that B schools around the world give out. And they give out about $350 million worth of scholarships. Now, based on our estimates, about 55% of the scholarship money goes to students who score 740 or higher, and pretty much all of it goes to people who score a 710 or higher. Essentially, and the reason why we have this stat is because at e-GMAT, we kind of work with about 10,000 paying students every year. So our students get about $45 million worth of scholarship every year. So we have a very statistically significant sample size to work with. So if you do the math, what it means is that, if you apply properly and you have a 740 or higher, you should get at least $40,000 worth of scholarship. And I say at least over there. And there are two factors that decide scholarships. One is your GMAT score. Second is your likability during the interview. Okay, so this was statistical data. Has some anecdotal data. One of our former students, Mansi, she scored a 770. She got admits from pretty much every school she applied to, including Harvard, Stanford, INSEAD, Wharton, as well as Kellogg. She studied at Harvard. She got $90,000 from them. Victor got full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler, again with a 770. One of our former students, Kong Bui, got 6 full scholarships. He actually went to Ohio Fisher as well. He got a very special scholarship from Ohio Fisher, where he not only did not pay a single penny for his MBA, but the school paid him $1,700 a month to study there. So he got money in his pocket to study at Ohio Fisher. Again, we've talked about Nishant, Pravi, and KK, and you can see the scholarship amounts that they got. This is just for one school over here. So the Nishant, for example, got multiple scholarships. KK got about 5 full rides over there. So the total scholarship amount is 3 to 4x over here. Here's another story, very interesting story. Ayush, one of our former students, scored a 710, was waitlisted by both Ross and Columbia. Both these schools interviewed him, and he kind of really connected with them during the interview, but yet he was surprised when the decision time came in round at the end of round two. Both these schools waitlisted him. So he reached out to these schools and said, "Hey, I thought we really connected during the interview. I was really hoping for an admit. What happened?" And both schools told him and said, "Hey, we love your candidacy, but your GMAT score is not there yet. So you've got to do something about it." So he prepared again, improved to 750, didn't even apply again, just updated his score, and both these schools converted that wait list into a scholarship, about $90,000 of total scholarship money. We saw the same thing recently in round one this year. So if you go to our YouTube channel, all of these interviews are on our YouTube channel, by the way. You're going to see one of our students who scored a 730, applied to Darden, Fuqua, Ross, as well as Tuck. And because she scored a 730 in February, she was able to apply in the early action rounds. She got rejects from Darden, Ross, and Fuqua. And so she really said, and she didn't hear anything from Tuck. So she said, man, my GMAT score is a problem. She improved her GMAT score to 760 again, updated that GMAT score from that 730 to 760 within 4 days. Tuck came back not only with an admit, but also with a $50,000 scholarship. Now, Tuck is the highest ranked school of these schools over here. Just shows that even in that GMAT optional world, the value of that GMAT score. And again, you can see, I think right now about 135 such instances on our YouTube channel over here. Here's a quote by John Fuller. He says, someone with a 770 is way more likely to get that financial reward than someone with a 670. Why? Because the school wants to buy that high GMAT score. The third reason is the delta in total earnings over a 10-year period. And this is something which over the last 6 years has become more and more prominent. What I'm showing you is two schools, Babson and MIT. Both these schools are 20 miles apart. And so essentially 70% of the graduates from these schools go to the New England area. Arguably, they have access to similar opportunities. But when you look at the starting salaries over here, they're very different. A Babson graduate gets about 95K in base salary. An MIT graduate right now gets about 145K. So these numbers are a bit older. And look at the average sign-on bonus. It's significantly different as well. Essentially, their first-year compensation right now is off by about 75K. If you assume that median number is about 45K, why? Because you're not going to get this bonus every year. You only get the bonus when you change jobs. Even then, over a 10-year period, just from a simple cash component standpoint, not including any interest earnings, you're looking at about 450K of net worth over here. So if you're aiming for that score of 670, 680, get to that score of 730 or 740. It's worth it over here. And by the way, if you guys need help getting there, some of you have been saying, hey, how do you build that study plan? How long do I need? Everyone needs a different amount of time to get there. We have experts who can help you build your study plan. These are GMAT strategy experts. They can really figure out how long you will need. Some of you may need a month, others may need 3 months based on your starting point. You can click on this over here, answer the respective questions. You can also see the case studies of how you've helped different people over there, and you're gonna figure out how long you need to ace the GMAT. Okay, and again, when you go to this page, you're gonna really see these case studies where you'd be able to see, okay, how many, if someone's stuck at 640, how we help that person. If someone wasn't able to go beyond 700, how did we figure out what are the areas he or she needed to work on, and again, depending on various case studies, you can really see the solutions we provided over here. You'd be able to read these case studies. This is, for example, a case study for Nishant. You can see that 690 score that we talked about earlier over here. Again, we have limited slots, so make sure if you're choosing a slot, you commit to it. If you can't commit to it, then don't choose one. This is all I would recommend. And make sure you provide as much detail as possible over here. The more detail you provide, the better your 30 minutes would be spent, and the more you'd get out of those 30 minutes over here. Okay. If you're an e-GMAT student, then you already have access to these tools. You already have access to our level 2 strategy experts, who are better trained than these guys, and make sure that you attend the onboarding sessions that are designed for you. And if you are towards the end, make sure you do that test readiness piece over there. Okay, with that, I'm done with the first part of the webinar. I'm now going to invite Harsha, who's going to help you get to that 90th percentile in GMAT RC. Harsha, over to you.
All right, so thanks for the introduction, Rajat. Let me first do a quick sound check. Are you guys able to hear me fine? Let's put that to a poll. Are you guys able to hear me fine? Just 1 minute. So make sure that you click on yes if there's no issue in audio and you guys are able to hear me fine. So that way I know that we can proceed. If you want me to increase or reduce the volume, I can do that as well. But yeah. So it looks like you guys have no problem with the audio. So that's good. So first, let me introduce myself. So my name is Harsha. I'm one of the RC experts at e-GMAT. I also look at CR, by the way. What did you learn from everything Rajat told you right now? The most important learning for you is that your GMAT score matters more than it has ever before, and you really need to score that score of 730. You saw three reasons why it's important to get a score of 730. So the next logical question that you should ask me right now, how do you get there? And for that, my friends, the answer is very simple. As far as reading comprehension is concerned, if you want to get a score of 730 plus, you need to get an ability of 90th percentile. You should be this good at RC to score a 730 plus on the GMAT. So make sure that that is your motivation as we start with the core of the session. This is your mantra for the day. I want 730 plus, I need 90th percentile ability in RC. So keep that in mind as we proceed with the rest of the session. So let me hide this for now. And we're going to talk about your RC approach to begin with. So we want to improve in RC. We all want that 90th percentile. The first step to improvement is self-diagnosis. So before we introduce how we at e-GMAT approach RC, let's discuss your current approach to RC. So there are two components that I'm very interested in. One is motivation and the other is method. So the first question that I have for you, and let's just do a simple yes no poll. How many of you truly, and I really mean this, how many of you truly enjoy doing reading comprehension? And be brutally frank, guys. This is a completely low risk environment. You guys should be frank with yourself. So the results are very, very indicative. A lot of you like CR, a lot of you like quant, but so many of you do not enjoy reading comprehension. And we are going to talk about that very specifically, the motivation aspect of it. What this tells me is a lot of you don't have that intrinsic motivation to RC. So what do we do about it? We'll talk about it. The next question I have for you is also kind of important. I really want to know, and this is for all those who uh, say that, hey, I do not really enjoy RC. What is it about RC that you do not enjoy? This is for all of you who posted no, and any of you who didn't post no but meant to say no, I don't enjoy RC. Let's hear some thoughts. Why do you not like RC? So, and I've made sure the results are broadcasted so that you guys can also see. Time consuming, passages are long, you get lost. People lose concentration, boring. The material is boring. All right, I think you should try our material. It should not be as boring. Unfavorable topics, yes, we hear that a lot. Confusing content, time pressure to read fast. So timing is something that we'll definitely address by the end of the session. So one of the things that we want to achieve in this session is to ensure that a lot of these addresses are concerns are addressed. So just give me one sec, guys. Let me just check my sound. So somebody has told me that there's an issue on the sound end. Just give me one sec. All right, it should be a little better now. Perfect. So for all of you and all these answers that I'm seeing right here, I hear you. I totally understand. In comparison, sentence completion, so sweet, so simple. You just have one sentence, you just have to correct it. Sentence correction. Or critical reasoning, you have so many interesting stuff happening there. And a lot of you probably are inclined towards quant. But I'm telling you, RC matters as much as all these sections. And we're going to talk about all that. So the next piece I really want to discuss, we are talking about motivation, but the next piece I want to address is what we call as method. So let's talk about your approach to RC. Now, typically we see three kinds of students. So I really want to know where you belong. So there is one category of students that skims through the passage. You don't skip the passage, you don't jump right to questions, but you really skim through. You give a quick read, then you jump to questions. Some of you might be in this category. Then I have another category of students who jump directly to questions. No need to read the passage. First, let's read the questions, then we'll figure out what we need to do on the passage. I'm sure some of you belong to this category as well. And then there's a third category. In this category, you take a lot of time, or at least you take as much time as necessary in the initial reading. You spend time on the initial reading, you read the passage, and then you start answering the questions. You do not touch the questions till you have read the passage thoroughly. So 3 variations. I can see that a lot of you are putting in, but I actually want this on a separate poll. That way you get a much better understanding of this. Where do you belong as far as this one is concerned? Where exactly is this? All right, I'm not able to find that poll right now, so that's fine. But I can see on the short answer pod, a lot of answers. So there's quite a few type 3s. So all of you who choose type 3, I'm very happy. I'm seeing fractions here. There's 2.5, 3.33. I don't know what that means exactly. But one of the primary objectives of today's session is to convert those of you who belong in this bucket and this bucket, people who skim the passage, and those of you who have a questions first approach. I want to convert you to this side of the equation. I want to introduce to you the third way of doing RC, and that is you take your time reading the passage, you spend some time thoroughly reading the passage, then and only then you look at the questions. And if you're doing it right, I can show to you that type 3 will work. We'll do that today. So, any questions so far on what we are planning to do today? Perfect. So now let's talk about, you guys told me which of these is your method. Now let me give you a situation. How many of you have faced this particular situation? You read the passage, you thought everything was clear, and then when you actually had to solve the questions, you struggled. Have you ever faced that situation before? All right, let me fix the audio. Let's do a quick sound check again. Can you guys hear me now? How is the audio coming through? Can you guys hear me? Let's do a quick sound check. All right, there's definitely something here that needs to be checked. So just give me a minute while I figure this out. All right, so what about now? Can you guys hear me now? Let's redo this poll. How is the audio coming through to you? Can you guys hear the host properly? In this, that's me in this case. Perfect. So good. So the audio issue seems to be resolved. That's great. So now let's move on. So let's continue our discussion. What we are doing now is self-diagnosis. You told me what your current process is. You told me what your motivation is. And I told you what I intend to do. I intend to take you from this approach to the next approach. So, how many of you have faced that situation where you thought you had understood everything there is to understand about the question, about the passage, and then when you faced the questions, you got stumped? How many of you have faced this situation? I'm sure this is a very common occurrence. All the time, yes, yes. Okay, so obviously this is something that keeps happening to a lot of us. And the key point about asking this question is for you to understand you're not alone in this journey. This is something that all of us go through, and we're going to work through it together. So the last question I have, as far as the self-diagnosis point is concerned, is in your own self-assessment, what is the level of understanding that you have of a passage after you've read it? Typically before you start reading the passage. So make sure you answer this here. So if you are that guy who's 90% to 100% in terms of understanding, this is your own self-evaluation. Then you click the first option. If you get it around between 50 to 75, you click that, and then let's see. So let's hear from you guys. And I'll wait for a few seconds for us to broadcast the results. So all the questions that we have just discussed are meant to put a mirror to our faces. It's self-reflection. Where do you stand as far as RC is concerned? All right. So yeah, I think it's just a temporary thing. It should start working soon. Let's figure it out. All right. So let me broadcast the results. So there's something here for all of us. In a group of around 250 odd, we got quite a few participants here for this poll. Only 7 of you tell me that you're 90 to 100% sure about the passage once you've read it. For the rest of you, 75 to 90%, 50 to 75, obviously there is some improvement that can happen. All right. So I'm still seeing some kind of audio issues. Let me recheck again. I'll probably reconnect. All right. Just one sec, guys. All right, folks. So now you guys should be able to hear me fine. Um, are you guys able to hear me? Let's do a quick sound check. Put yes if you can hear me now. Perfect. Good. So it's much better now. So I'll stick to this particular net. Perfect. All right. Thanks for the answers there. So let's move on. So the key learning there is a lot of us need to work towards getting that 90th percentile. In your own self evaluation, you know that there's still a level of learning you need to unlock. So let's focus on that. So, with that understanding, let's talk about our goals today. Today, my first goal is to get you to read in a different way. It's to change the way you approach RC, both in terms of motivation and in terms of method. I want to change you from a passive reading approach to an active reading approach. After today, I don't want you to ever skim in RC ever again. Skimming is one of the worst practices that you can do in RC. My advice, never do it. So, from skimming, reading without a particular aim in mind, to active reading, or what I call as reading with intent, reading for comprehension, we're going to learn how to do that today. We'll see how a really good reading approach will help you get the maximum out of the passage. And to do that, we'll talk about what we at e-GMAT call as reading strategies. And through some very small passages, we're going to demonstrate how this works. The second step, once we've taught you what these strategies are, we're going to use that information to solve questions. So in the initial stage, we're going to solve a main point and an inference question, but we're not stopping there. The third phase of this, we are actually going to apply everything we have learned to a 700 level official GMAT question. And that's my way of telling you that these processes work. And these processes have been there for years and it genuinely works. We've refined it, fine-tuned it over a period of time. So I'm going to demonstrate all that to you, but I want you to participate really, really well. So there's one piece of expectation setting that I should do right now. This is not the session where we do 5 or 6 passages and like 5 questions from each passage. This is not that kind of session. We are going to do 2 small passages and 1 big passage, and you'll see time will fly as we do this. After the session, we're of course going to be providing you with 5 to 6 passages. You can always go through those. But this session, very, very specific, 3 passages in total. So guys, are you looking forward to improving in RC? Perfect. Good. I'm very happy to see the participation. Hell yes, that's the spirit. So I told you we're going to talk about the motivation and the method. So let's talk first about motivation. Because without motivation, whatever method you apply does not work. So what do I mean by motivation? You know what you need to achieve now. The first part of the session, that's what we did. You know that you need something in this range. I told you what you need to achieve that. You need a 90th percentile ability in RC. Now, you cannot get a 90th percentile without getting immersed in the passage. You cannot read it like a storybook. You cannot be like, hey, I do not like this topic. If you're a science graduate, it's fine. You should still have the same kind of interest towards the humanities passage, and vice versa. If you're from a sociological background, a quantum physics passage should not scare you. You should be like, damn, I really want to learn this now. That's the motivation, that's the spirit with which you approach RC. So it's all about the attitude. It seems like a very small point, but you cannot really do any kind of significant change without the right attitude. And that's the reason I stress on this. This is the first thing I always tell my students. Get immersed in the passage. Keep the end goal in mind. You want 730 plus, you want 90th percentile. There's no way in hell you're getting that without the right attitude for RC. You need to take interest in RC. RC is like a lover. You have to give her attention, or him. Otherwise, it won't come to you. It's as simple as that. So keep that in mind. From today, I want you to take a genuine interest in RC. It has to, you have to do it. How do you do that? Keep your end goal in mind. You need this to crack that 730 plus. You need this to get that kind of scholarship. You need this to get into one of those schools. So, absolutely. So, now let's talk about the method. Today, we are going to discuss three specific reading strategies. In total, at e-GMAT, we teach around 7 reading strategies. Today, we are going to discuss three of those, three of the important ones, and these are across various levels. At the sentence level, we're going to see how to look at sentences in a different way. You're not going to read a complex sentence and go, "Oh my God." You're going to break it down. You're going to break it down into manageable chunks and extract meaning from it, and we're going to see how. At the paragraph level, we're going to look at a strategy called keywords. It's one of my favorite strategies. What do I mean by keywords? Keywords are words or very specific phrases that the author uses in a passage to impart some kind of meaning. Keywords are like anchor words. If you catch hold of them while you're reading the passage, you can unlock the author's mind. You can unlock the intent with which the author wrote the passage. In other words, you can predict what the author is going to write next. That's the level of uh, attention, that's the level of detail you can really achieve if you focus on keywords. And the third strategy that we're going to follow, we're going to look at, is something that applies both within paragraphs and across paragraphs. It is something called summarization, and this is a very underrated skill. When you see a lot of text, whenever you're reading after 2 3 lines, you reach a point where you're saturated. If you continue reading, if you continue pushing yourself, then you figure out that you did not really understand the first 2 3 lines properly, and that's when the screw ups happen. That's when you realize that you haven't really understood the passage. So every time you read a set of lines, you will learn to summarize those lines, understand what is actually being said, then you move on. There's no point just jumping through. So we're going to see how summarization will help you do much better as far as reading comprehension is concerned. So with this, I hope you guys are looking forward to it. As we go through the first paragraph, through the first passage, make sure that you read slowly. Remember, the GMAT is not a test of time. It's not at all a test of time. It's a test of your logical ability. It's not meant to be a test of your time. So don't worry about time. Read slowly, extract meaning. Those are your keywords for the day. Now, this is true because and especially right now, because when you're learning something new, you're going to be introduced to a new method. You have to take your time with it. So no skimming, read slowly. I'm going to introduce your first argument. Typically it should take you around a minute to read this. The passage is on your screen right now. You should take around a minute for this. All right, so you guys should be done reading this by now. So let me bring the question for you. It's just one question, guys. It's a main point question. So one advisory as far as all questions are concerned, always make sure that you click on the option called still solving before you start solving. That way, as a group, you guys can time yourself. I know when to proceed. So all of you who are solving this question, start with still solving. Then as you choose one of the option choices, click on the option choice. So here's the question for you, and I am about to bring the poll, and here's the poll. I'll adjust this. Your time starts now. All right, let's start bringing those answers in. Last 10 seconds, and then we start. Three, two, one, and pause. All right. So I see a lot of answers here. So let me just broadcast the results. Let's take a quick look at the results. So choice B was popular. Choice C was also popular. Around 20% of the group chose options B and C. Choice D was the clear favorite, 48%. It's still less than half the batch. Choice D, by the way, is the correct answer. We're going to discuss that. But the point I'm trying to make is less than 50% of the batch has got this question right. And that's where the learning is going to start. So let's start discussing this particular question. Let me take this out. So meanwhile, I saw a few comments. My head is spinning already. So welcome to RC. It should not happen once you get used to it. All right. So let's understand this passage and pay very, very close attention to how we are approaching the passage. It's very, very important. Bordering on the extreme. One definition of ethnocentrism considers it something something. Let's pause right here because we already have hit a lot of text. We need to understand what this is. So, firstly, there is this term that's being introduced, ethnocentrism. I have no intention of repeating ethnocentrism, neither to you nor while I'm reading in my head. So, one important trick is always shorten what you can. I don't need to keep saying ethnocentrism. I'll call it EC. Henceforth, I'm going to call this EC. Likewise, even when you guys are analyzing this, start calling this EC. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of EC considers it as something. We'll get to that later. We're breaking it into chunks. The first question I have for you is, what is meant by bordering on the extreme? Let's focus on just that one phrase, bordering on the extreme. What does it mean? What does it tell you? Let's hear a few answers. Getting the gist, in-depth analysis. One extreme explanation, something extreme. Now we are talking. Yes. Now we are getting the right answer here. Bordering on the extreme is the author's way of telling you that whatever is following is an extreme view, or in other words, what we call as an exaggerated view. Whatever is following is exaggerated to some degree. It's not what you regularly define this term as. It's an extreme definition of the term, or in other words, it's an exaggerated definition of the term. Is this point clear to begin with? This is just the first 4 words, but that tells you something. And that's the point. You need to focus, you need to break it down, focus, and focus here. So, bordering on the extreme, one definition of EC, that also tells a story. Why did the author mention one definition of EC? Why not just say EC? That's the question I have for you. Let's hear from a few more folks. There are other definitions, various meanings, multiple views. What follows is the definition, not exactly. So some of you have definitely got this. He is just telling you this is one definition of EC. He's not telling you that, hey, this is the definition of EC. Or in other words, he's not telling you that this is the actual definition of EC. This is the accepted original definition of EC. He's just saying, hey, there is one version of EC. I'm presenting that to you. It's as simple as that. He's introducing the concept, yes, but he's not presenting his view. The one thing you cannot be sure of is whether the author agrees with this definition. He's presenting some definition. Who made this definition, we don't know, but the author is presenting us with that definition. So already you have 2 pieces of information that you have extracted just from the first 8 words. So bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism, so not necessarily the author's definition. Let's move on. Considers it a schismatic in-group, out-group differentiation, in which is a keyword, by the way. The minute I see in which, again, I know what is going to follow is a description. So what happens in this particular definition, we are about to find out. So let's read that. Internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, devotion to the in-group are correlated. So what is correlated? What exactly do you say is correlated? Connected, linked, absolutely. Perfect. You guys are getting this. But see, I'm paying attention to that because that word is important. So, bordering on the extreme, one particular definition of EC considers it to be a schismatic in-group, out-group differentiation, etc., in which cohesion, peace, solidarity, devotion, etc., towards the in-group are linked with a state of hostility toward the out-group. So, which are often perceived as subhuman and or the incorporation of evil. So now let's talk about another key skill. I told you one of the things that we are going to focus on is summarization. If you had to summarize this, wouldn't you say something like this? Cohesion, peace, solidarity, loyalty, devotion to your group is essentially love for your own people. You can say love, you can say like, it does not matter what the exact word is, but it's some positive emotion towards your own people, is correlated with or is linked with some negative emotion, hostility, hate, insert your own favorite word there, towards the other people who are not part of your group. Is this concept coming through? What I've done is just simply summarizing it. Every time you read this, you don't want to read cohesion, peace, solidarity, loyalty, right? Every time you read this particular point, do you want to keep going through this very, very painful, convoluted sentence? Absolutely, you don't want to. So summarize it and then you move on. Don't move on without summarizing this. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So what do we have so far? The author has presented one definition of EC. That one particular definition is exaggerated as per the author. That's so 3 pieces of information. One definition of EC was given. That definition as per the author is exaggerated. And what exactly does this definition say? Hey, these 2 things are linked or correlated. Love for your own people, hate for people who are outside people. These are the 3 pieces of information that you should have got from reading this particular passage. The question I have for you is, how many of you got all these 3 points? So you can pick what you are not able to understand. The question I have there is, which of this was where you're not able to understand? If you choose none, that means that you got everything. And the results of just this question tells a beautiful story. How do we know it's people? Because I'm also looking at the last line. It says subhuman. So we're talking about people. That much is understood from here. But even if you don't figure out people, that's perfectly fine. You could still get this one. You could still say love for in group, hate for out group, if that helps. You would still get that much from the passage just by that. So I can see that a lot of you got the first point, but look at point 2 and point 3. So many of you did not catch that. Isn't it something you should have caught while you're reading it? Now imagine approaching that main point question after you have understood these three pieces of information. This is all the juice that you can extract from this small passage. This passage is barely 40 words, by the way, but there are three pieces of information you can extract, and that's what I want to tell you in this particular passage. And everything flows from something we have seen. The first point is directly flowing from the definition that's given. The second point is an inference we drew from bordering on the extreme. So very, very important point. Very important point. You should always actively make connections. You should actively try to make inferences. So what did I mean when I said active reading versus passive reading? Passive reading is how you read a storybook. You just read on. You don't try to connect information. When you're reading an RC passage on GMAT, don't do that. You have to try to connect everything you have read, because it all forms a story. The author has written a story, you need to crack that story. So if that is clear, let's kind of start getting into the next portion. Let's look at each of the questions. Option D is the answer, and we're going to go through each of the questions for this one. All right. So what about option 1? It says to criticize a concept that encourages hostility towards people not belonging to the same group. Now, does the author criticize EC? That's the question you should ask yourself. Does the author talk about EC, or does he just talk about one definition of EC? And that too, as per the author, an extreme definition of EC. Yes, the answer is no. You guys are getting it. The author never really talks about the concept of EC as such. All he does is present one definition of EC. He has nowhere criticized EC, right? The second point, does even the definition that's given to you, does it say that the concept encourages hostility? All you know is love for in-group is correlated with hate for out-group. Love for your own people is correlated or linked with hatred for the other group. Just because two things are linked, does it mean hostility is being encouraged? Not a chance. Somebody put it the exact way I would have put it. Not a chance. So option A is wrong on two accounts. I hope option A is clear to you. Very few of you chose option A, so I don't think that's an issue as such. Let's move to option B. Options B and C were chosen by a lot of you. So option B says to evaluate the concept of EC while enlisting its various features. Again, if you had paid attention to the passage, now it should be clear. Does the author give any, the author has only defined EC. He's not done any evaluation. The first thing I should tell you is, what does evaluation mean? What is meant by evaluation? Can somebody put it on the short answer pod? Those of you who are very sure about it. What exactly is meant by evaluating something? Pros and cons, give pros and cons, positives and negatives. So all of you who are saying that, perfect. Offer a judgment after considering the pros and cons. That I will take that answer as well. You cannot evaluate something without considering the pros and cons. On the GMAT, if you see an option choice which says evaluate, ask, is the author talking about the pros and cons? If you're evaluating X, if the option choice says evaluate X, if the pros and cons of X have not been discussed in the passage, then there's no way an evaluation has happened. Examine, it's true, but you have to look at both the positives and the negatives, the pros and the cons. So does the author discuss the pros and cons of EC? All he does is just present one definition of EC, right? That's it. So those of you who chose option B, clarity coming through. Those who chose option B, no, that's all that cohesion, solidarity, all of that is basically love for your own people. That's not features of EC. And even if you say it's features of EC, that's just one definition of EC. We have not gotten to the concept of EC as such. Perfect. So for those of you who chose option B, is it clear? Perfect. So if you have any more doubts on this, just put it on the Q&A pod. We'll be happy to help you out. Let's go to option C. And let me clear this. Option C was also a very, very popular incorrect option choice, but now you should know why it's not the correct answer. Does the author define ethnocentrism? That's the question I have for you. Does the author define EC? No hierarchy defined is also correct. That's another reason you should reject it. So whoever said that, you're also perfectly right. But exactly, now you guys are getting it. How would you have arrived at this answer? If you had focused when you're reading this, if you had noticed one belief of EC, that keyword one belief of, rather one definition of EC, if you focus right there when you're reading this, you would not have got confused with one definition. You know it's not necessarily his definition. Rejecting option C would have taken you less than 5 seconds and you would have done it accurately. You guys get what I'm talking about? If you're done that bit of analysis while you're reading, rejecting option C is all of 5 seconds for you. You read it, you reject it. It's as simple as that. So let's look at the correct option for this. Yeah, so by answer C, it's stating that there is only one definition. It's not stating there's only one definition. Option C says, does the author define ethnocentrism? He's not defining it. He's just giving you one definition. There could be 10,000 definitions. I don't know. The other portion about option C, there's no talk of hierarchy. It's also not mentioned anywhere. Let's look at option D. To introduce the concept of EC by presenting a view on it. Isn't this what we arrived at? Isn't this what the author is trying to tell you? Does anybody have any questions about option D? Or why it's anybody feels that, hey, this cannot be the correct answer? Typically, a question that I get asked is, how do you know the author is introducing the concept of EC? So imagine that I introduce you to a friend of mine, right? You came to my house, I introduced you to a friend of mine. Does it mean that I'm giving you my opinion of this particular guy I'm introducing you to? He could be a good guy or a bad guy. I'm not telling you whether he's good or bad. I'm just introducing you to that person. So all I'm doing here is if I'm the author, all I'm doing is I'm introducing you, the reader, to the concept of EC. How am I doing that? By presenting a view on it. So somebody mentioned I left D because it's presenting a view. Option D is correct because it says presenting a view. If it was presenting the author's view, presenting his view, her view, it would not be the correct answer. Because it's presenting a view, that's what makes it a correct answer. So the author has introduced you to this thing called EC, ethnocentrism. And how has he done that? By presenting one particular view on it. Clarity? Is it clear why option D is the correct answer? So there are some things that very good. I like to see those yeses. A view, it can be anybody's view. It could be absolutely anybody's view. Author, scholar, critic, you don't know. So some very important insights just from this very first question. One thing you do not need to do to ace GMAT RC. Firstly, you do not need to be an English Pandit or an English scholar. We saw all these complicated sentences. All we did was breaking it down. Example, I focused on bordering on the extreme. Just to give you an example. Unfamiliar words, you will always see this on the GMAT. You will always, in RC, you will find some word that you really don't know. But does it matter? I still don't know what schismatic means. I don't know about you guys, but I still don't know what schismatic really means. But did it matter? You were still able to solve a main point question, right? Did it matter that you do not know what schismatic means? Assuming you did not know what it is. And the reason for that is, yeah, even frankly, a lot of us struggle with a word like this. And the reason it did not matter is GMAT is not meant to be a vocabulary test. It's meant to be a test of logical ability. You will always have words that you have no idea about. If it's important, the author will tell you what it means. Otherwise, the author won't test you on it. You won't find a question on it. Trust the test maker. So that's something we need to keep in mind as far as RC is concerned. You did not need to have any kind of specific knowledge. You most of us are not from the field where we know what ethnocentrism means. I don't know what ethnocentrism means. Did it matter? Keep that in mind. If you're a science graduate who's looking at a humanities passage and grumbling that, hey, I don't know humanities, how do I solve this? It does not matter. Likewise, if you're a humanities guy looking at a quantum physics passage, you cannot grumble that, hey, I don't know this topic well. It does not matter. You can still extract everything you need to extract from here. So, very, very important piece for you. So, what is it that you actually need to do? 100% immersion in the passage. That's what we did. I didn't want to skim through this. We wanted to really understand everything the author wanted to say. I wanted to extract all those 3 pieces of information, get into that mode. The next thing, look at everything we did in this particular passage. We broke down those big sentences. We actually focused on all those big sentences, breaking it down, understanding it in chunks. We have done that. We focused on keywords. Every time we saw a keyword, we asked, hey, why is it here? What is going to happen now? We did that. And you saw how we did summarization as well. That summarization told you that entire long convoluted text is nothing but love for your own people, hate for your other people. It's as simple as that. How much time should I take to read a typical passage? Anywhere between 3 to 4 minutes for your actual passages, but we will discuss time later on. Hold on to your thoughts about time. Don't worry. Don't worry about time at the moment. Hold on to it. We'll get to it once we're done with the core part of the session. So, if you guys are ready for question 2, shall we do question 2? No need to feel stressed out. Nothing we do is rocket science, by the way. It's not, neither is it too easy, but it's not difficult either. Keep that in mind. All of us can do it. So, let's do question 2. As always, it's a short passage, so it should take you around a minute. Your time starts now. All right, so now it's time to look at the question. Here's the question. And as always, start with still solving. Remember, guys, this is not a main point question. This is an inference question. All right, folks, let's get those answers in another 10 seconds and then we begin. All right, 3, 2, 1, and hold. Yes, please show the passage of the question. We'll make sure that's done next time. Thank you. I realized that that should be done. So thanks for the feedback. Yeah. So how was this question, guys? Again, it's a question that's high on learning. So let's see how you guys polled as a group, because the results are very interesting. 25% of the group chose A, 27% chose B, and 33% chose B. So there's a good mix of answers all over. So felt like multiple correct answers. Yes, I can see the confusion reflecting in the option choices here, but there is only one correct option choice, and we're going to look at that. So good, some good insights there. I'm glad you guys enjoyed this question, because I told you, you need to start enjoying RC. Yeah, we are removing that. Don't worry. So now let's get out of this particular question. Let's start analyzing the passage. The question can come much later. We'll discuss that. Before I do that, in fact, that's very important. It's a question for all of you. The first line of this passage had this particular phrase, deemed to be, right? How many of you saw that? There was this deemed to be written somewhere, right? Right at the beginning. How many of you saw it? How many of you paused right there and asked yourself, hey, what does this tell you? Those of you who have done that might have fared a little better in this question. Paused and made a connection, reworded, yes. The point is, if you saw that, there's something here. So let's look at a similar example to bring in the concept, bring it home. If I assume I am the author, I am giving you this statement. The color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. The question I have for you is, which of these following statements can you actually infer? Just give me 1 minute. Let me bring the poll for this. Yeah, there it is. If your question is this, the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. Now I'm giving you two statements. Which of these two statements can you actually infer? Which of these two statements can you not infer? And if you can infer both, feel free. So let me start broadcasting results here. So a lot of you are getting this concept, like 82% of the batch is getting it. But for the rest of you, the 13% and the 5%, so around 17% of the batch is still a little confused about this. The key point here is the impact of this word, considered to. So let me hide this. So 88% of you, you guys are correct. You can infer the first statement, but you cannot infer the second statement. Why is that? I'm the author. I'm telling you that the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. The question you have to ask, who is doing this consideration? Is it necessarily the author? It's very similar to what you saw in the last question. One definition of ethnocentrism. The question you had to ask was, whose definition is this? Not necessarily the author. Here you have to ask, who is doing this consideration? Who is considering blue to have a soothing effect on the moods of people? Are you sure it's the author? How can you be sure it's the author? That's the question. All we know is there definitely are at least some people. The reason some, at least one person, otherwise this consideration wouldn't be there. So there's at least one person, or in other words, there's at least some people who regard the color blue as soothing. That's an inference you can make. Can you really say the color blue is soothing? We don't know. Some people believe blue is soothing. Is blue really a soothing color? We don't know. Is this concept coming through? Considered is the keyword here, absolutely. The author is telling you that, hey, blue is considered to have a soothing effect, but who is doing this consideration? That's the question you need to ask. Is the author considering it, or is it somebody else? Is this concept coming through? Because that's very, very important. It's very similar to one definition of EC, which you saw in the last question. Whose definition? How do you know it's the author's definition? It's the same point. Absolutely. So the next question you have to ask is, if I was the author, if I had to let you know that blue is soothing, if I wanted to confidently tell you that blue is a soothing color, how would I put it across? I would put it across this way, as far as RC is concerned. I would say the color blue has a soothing effect on the moods of people. In this case, I am telling you this. If somebody asks you who says this, you can say confidently the author says this. Do you see the difference between the last statement and this statement? Here it's a valid inference. Is this concept coming through? Here it's a perfectly valid inference, right? Who is doing the consideration? I'm telling you, as the author, I'm telling you that the color blue has a soothing effect on the moods of people. There is no two ways about it. In the other situation, you are not sure who is doing that consideration, that blue is soothing. Perfect. If that is clear, now come to the question, come to the passage, and notice that first piece, deemed to be. It's practically the same as considered to be. Yes, if that is so, the second one would be correct to answer your question. So your deemed to be in this passage has the same meaning as considered to be. Somebody is deeming EC and its variants to be connected with xenophobia. Who that is, I do not know, but you cannot say it's the author. And that's what I want you to take away. Pay very, very careful attention to these things. So deemed to be is a very important keyword. It tells you the author is trying to distance himself from this particular definition, this particular notion. I'm telling you, I'm presenting this to you, but I'm not telling you I'm in agreement with this. So ethnocentrism, or EC, and its canonical variants. So EC and its different variants. Again, I don't know what canonical means. I may or may not know, but let's move on. EC and its variants are deemed to be, or in other words, considered to be intimately connected with xenophobia. I'll call this XP. So quick question. Again, just to make sure we are driving home the point. Does the author say that EC and XP are connected? Good. Obviously not, right? Now let's move on. So EC and its variants are considered to be or deemed to be intimately connected with XP. And then you have a comma. And then you have a complex attitude system cum sentiment structure involving aversion or dislike and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange or the alien and everything that the stranger or alien represents. So yet again, some kind of a complex definition, right? How many of you broke your heads over this? How many of you struggled with this? Perfect. So, what did we learn in the last passage that you should have applied to this passage? There also you saw a lot of complex text, right? Did you summarize this one? Did you try to summarize this? You should have. That's one thing I need to tell you. If you try to summarize it, you've done a good job here. So first of all, as of now, what do we know? EC and its variants considered to be closely connected to XP. We know that. If you summarize this, can somebody tell me in the most concise way what this means, this entire definition that's presented here? Something is presented. What does it mean? Let's do this as an exercise. Dislike towards strangers. Good. Any other way of putting it? Defining XP, absolutely, that's what it is. Dislike towards the outgroup. You're borrowing from this previous one, all right, but it's still somewhat correct. Dislike towards strangers. So you guys are getting this, right? If you had to summarize this, it's as simple as that. At some level, it's hatred or dislike towards the alien or the strangers or the foreign. So all of you are getting this now. Now, does anybody have a question about this particular definition that's presented? There's a definition here, right? Complex attitude system, or essentially the summarization of hatred for aliens, this entire thing. Does anybody have a doubt about, is this definition a definition that the author agrees with, or is this is this a definition that we don't know whether the author agrees with it or not? Does anybody have this doubt? So some of you are saying yes, some of you are saying he's just stating it, we don't know. So for those of you who say we don't know, actually the answer is this is a definition that the author agrees with. Remember one thing, if the author wants to indicate that I do not, hey, I do not agree with this, he or she will let you know. For example, what did you see in the last passage? One definition of EC says this. He let you know that this is just one definition, not necessarily my definition. Even here, he made sure he let you know that, hey, some people are considering EC and XP to be connected. Now the question is, you have to focus on how the sentence is structured. EC and its canonical variants are considered to be connected with, intimately connected with XP. This considered to be is very clear. After that, you have a comma, and then you have this particular thing. I'll give you a very similar example. Yes, deemed to be is about whether EC and XP are connected. That's a good question. As per the author, there are at least some people who believe that EC and XP are intimately connected. But it stops there. After that, you have a comma, and then you have something here. I'll give you an example to make this point clear. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Let's look at this example, guys. Can you see the example here? Verbo is considered a unicorn. Perfect. So in this particular example, Verbo is considered a unicorn, a company with $1 billion evaluation or valuation. Is Verbo definitely a unicorn as per the author? No. It's considered a unicorn. Who's considering it a unicorn? We don't know. Now the next question I have for you here is Verbo a company with $1 billion valuation? If I tell you that Verbo is a company with $1 billion valuation, would you dispute that? Or rather, you guys are putting yes for the previous question. I understand that now. So it's separated by a comma. The considered applied only to the part of the sentence which said whether Verbo is a unicorn or not. That it's a consideration. Whose consideration? I don't know. But what follows the comma, a company with $1 billion valuation, is just a fact that is describing what a unicorn is. Do you guys see the difference that comma makes here? That actually differentiates, right? That's separating the two parts of the sentence. This is what I mean by you really need to focus attention on how the sentence is structured also. This is one way of looking at that. I'll give you another example on a very similar vein. Let's look at this one. Google, an internet company, is considered a good buy or a good investment, let's say. Whether Google is an internet company or not, that's not something you as an author, if you're the author and you write this, you're not disputing that, right? The author is a logical human being. In that comma, or within that comma, all you have presented is a fact about Google. Does the author explicitly tell you that Google is a good investment? No. I'm telling you, hey, there is this consideration that Google is a good investment. Or in other words, imagine that you are running an investment company and you have an analyst who works for you. Your analyst comes to you and tells you, Google, an internet company, is considered a good buy. And then you buy shares, you invest in Google, and then Google starts failing. What will you do with that analyst? Absolutely. Oh no, you in the first case you cannot get rid of him. That's the point. Because he's not telling you. He just told you that Google is a good buy. I mean, Google is considered a good buy. On the other hand, if he told you Google, an internet company, is a good investment, then you would fire him. He told you Google is a good investment. Here, he is just telling you Google, which is, by the way, an internet company, is considered a good buy. He is not qualifying it with his opinion. You cannot fire him. Absolutely. Second one is correct. Which one? Google is a good incorrect response. You cannot say Google is a good investment based on what is given. In incorrect responses, point two, most people consider Google a good buy is also not correct. One of you has pointed it out correctly. Most versus some. Some people consider Google a good investment. That you can say. How do you know that some becomes most? How do you know a majority of people consider Google to be a good investment? Most requires majority, right? Do you see the difference between most and some? RC and CR are perfectly correlated. Trust me, I do both. So good. Is this point coming through? Now, let's come back to this particular passage. You can ask that in the question. So let's come back to this particular passage because we seem to be sidetracked a little bit. Do you see why what follows this comma is the definition of XP? It's a definition of XP which the author agrees with. Do you guys see that now? Clear now. I saw somebody put clear now. I'm happy to see that. That's very important. You need to have this eye for detail. Who is saying what? That skill will really help you on the GMAT RC. Perfect. Now let's move on. You've understood this. Let's move on to the next portion. Some cultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. Pause right there. There's a beautiful something that's happening here. How many of you focused on this word even? How many of you paused when you saw even and say, hey, what does it tell you? It tells you a very specific story. What is it? What does EC tell? What does the word even tell you? Extreme correlation went even further. Oh, you guys are killing it now. Those of you who are participating here on this. Further to the consideration, not exactly. Extreme correlation goes to the next extent. Those are all on the right track. I'll give you an example for that as well. So even is what we call as an emphasis keyword. So there are two types of emphasis that can be applied. So take a look at this example. Shaq was the most dominant basketball player of his time. Some analysts even considered him to be the most dominant player of all time. What does even do here? The first line told us that, hey, Shaq was the most dominant player of his time. Even here is emphasizing it even further. Some people even go on to say that to the next level, Shaq is not just the most dominant player of this time, he is the most dominant player of all time. Maximize, exaggerate, emphasize the point. You guys are getting this? Look at the second example I have there for you about GDP. GDP is increasingly a poor measure of prosperity. It is not even a reliable gauge of production. This is what you call as decreasing emphasis. So you see how even can be used in multiple ways. You need to be very careful. But the minute you catch on to this even, the level of understanding you get, I'm going to explain to you now. So everybody clear with even? Yeah, the word not helps in that. Absolutely. Even in combination with not. Perfect. Good. So if this is clear, let's understand what we just read. Firstly, in the first line, you were given that EC and its variants. Hey, some people consider it to be intimately connected. That was what was given to you initially. In this line, the author says now there are some people go to such a level to say they are not just connected, they are practically opposite sides of the same coin. What does opposite sides of the same coin? If you have a coin, there is a head side and there is a tail side. But one thing you can be sure about is in one coin, you will always have those two sides. If there is a head, there is also a tail. Moral of the story, opposite sides of the same coin. How many of you got this reading just by reading this? Oh, I'm sorry, I kind of closed that by accident. Let me bring that back. Just give me one sec, guys. Here it is. How many of you got this point just by reading this? And that's very, very important. Those of you who got this, you are the guys who probably got the right answer. It's not opposites. Yeah, they're opposite sides of the same coin, but the point is they are part of the same coin. And the minute you focused on even, you see very cleverly what we have done. We have connected line 2 to line 1. In line 1, the author said, hey, there are these people who consider EC and XP to be intimately connected. But then there are these anthropologist folks who go even so far as to say they are not just connected, they are so connected they practically coexist. Next level. I think that is clear. So let's move on. But a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. Yet again, see how beautifully the author tells you that, hey, this is not me telling you. Some few voices, again, some other people have cautioned that this need not be the case. So, if you got all of that, considered to be closely connected, what is XP? There are some experts who take it to an extreme level. What is that extreme level? They are not just well connected, they're not just intimately connected, they go to the extent that they're practically coexisting. You cannot have one without the other. But even there are some other experts who disagree with that also. Did you guys get all these pieces of information? So extracting all the information from this, these are the 4 points I'll tell you. The question I have for you, similar to the last time, is how many of you got all these 4 questions correctly? I mean, how many of you were not able to catch all of these? 4 points, right? Which I'm giving you. On the poll, how many of you missed out? What did you miss out on? Let's put that. And this is how you learn. So let me start broadcasting results because you can already see a good indication. This definitely, a lot of you missed that point 3. This opposite sides of the same coin. You did not focus on the keyword even. You did not really spend a little time to understand what is opposite sides of the same coin. But once you have understood this, imagine how easy it is going to be to answer those questions. And that is the magic of doing a very strong passage analysis. All right. I think the point is made. Let's move on. Let me reopen this. Let's clear some answers. Good. So how are you guys feeling about everything we've done so far? Don't worry about time. Don't worry about time, my dear sir. We'll discuss that. Sir or ma'am, we'll discuss that. If after few he would have not put few voices, I don't understand the question. You can just put it on the Q&A. We'll help you out with that. Don't worry. So let's also talk about what exactly is a correct inference as far as GMAT RC is concerned. A correct inference. So remember, a passage is written by an author. So when you say what can be inferred according to the passage or what according to the author, It's practically the same thing. You're talking about what the author believes in. A correct inference is something that the author will always believe in. Keep that in mind. A correct inference cannot be something about which the author has not told you anything. He must have talked about it. A correct inference always from the POV of the author. It has to be something the author believes in, something he's talked about. And remember the definition of XP. The author is not going to disagree with that. He's a logical person. He's a sensible person. He's not going to disagree with the definition of XP that is given, because he's given that as a definition for you to understand. And I think some of you have a usual question. We'll come to that when we get into this. What was the answer? So I see a lot of excitement for the answer. So let's get to the answers. Good. Happy to see the excitement. So the question was, what can you infer from the passage, right? Option A says XP and EC are different facets of the same coin. Or in other words, opposite sides of the same coin. But who is saying this? Is the author saying this, or is it some socio-cultural anthropologists who are saying this? It's those some people who are saying this, no? Not necessarily the author. The option is in front of you. You're going through each option one by one, don't worry. The author never told you about this, right? Some anthropologists believe that this particular thing is true. Inference means must be true. Absolutely. So an inference must be true in RC as per the author. The author has to agree with it. Here, the author is merely quoting some anthropologists. Some anthropologists believe that, hey, these two things are opposite sides of the same coin. You don't know the author agrees with that. You don't know if it's really true. If the author told you that, yeah, you can consider that to be true. The author is the king or queen of RC. Keep that in mind. Option A is wrong because this is the point of view of the anthropologist and not the author. We don't know what the author really talks about in this particular thing. Option B, very similar reason. If I can bring back your answers. A lot of you struggled in this question. But now I think you will understand why you struggled. You see all those points of disagreement. So here are your results. Again, for reference, I'll just keep this down. What about option B? How many of you chose this? So 25% of you chose option A. I hope it's clear now. Is it a 700 level question? It's not a full passage. It's one paragraph of a big passage. So yeah, as far as this, it may be a 700 level question for all you know, but it's not easy. So for all you know, it's 700 level. Let's look at option B. The canonical variants of EC are closely connected with XP. If you paid attention to deemed to be while you're reading this, you should not have fallen for this. Is it clear why B is not the correct answer? The answer to your question, the answer to this question is deemed to be. You don't know the author believes in this. Clear? Is this concept coming through? Perfect. Now let's look at option C, which thankfully, mercifully, most of you did not choose. Some of you chose this. Honestly, a lot of you did not choose this because you probably thought they are connected to each other. But in reality, the reason option C is right is because we really don't know what the author believes in. In RC, author's intent matters. Do you guys see that? All right, let's go to option D. Some of you actually chose option B. The operative word here is cause. In some cases, xenophobia could be the cause of ethnocentrism. Anywhere have we talked about causality here? Whether it's author's view or anybody else's view, we are not talked about causality here. Nowhere do we see because, since, anything, right? So you should not have chosen option D at any rate. So the correct answer for this question is actually option E. Why is this the correct answer? Did you summarize the definition? Remember, the author is a logical person. He was not going to disagree with a basic stated fact. Some of you typically ask this question at this point: can an inference be something that's already stated in the passage? Say, for example, here, XP has been defined in the passage. So what option E is essentially telling you what XP is. So is that a valid inference? How many of you have this kind of a doubt? Perfect. So this is a question that a lot of you ask me, both in CR and in RC. So let me explain this once and for all. Remember, as far as GMAT RC is concerned, an inference can be a restatement of given information. And I'll also tell you why it is so. It is because, what is the definition of inference? You guys tell me, what is the definition of inference? As far as you know? What is an inference? That's the question. I like that answer. What is 100% true? What is must be true? An inference is that which is definitely true, or it must be true if your given information is considered true. Simple, right? So even even the information that is given is also true, right? Even the information that has been given, by definition, it's already true. Therefore, if that comes in as an answer choice, you cannot say, hey, this is not must be true. You know that to be true. Remember, always on the GMAT, you can have a restatement of given information as a valid inference. I'll give you a more simple example, very, very basic example. We have this in the CR module, by the way, those of you who are e-GMAT students. A is taller than B if your statement. So B is shorter than A is a valid inference. If A is taller than B is your given statement, B is shorter than A is a perfectly valid inference. It's practically a restatement, but if you see that as an option choice, there's no way you can reject it on the GMAT. Entails does not mean it is the reason, by the way. I don't know your name here, but to answer your question, entails means involves. XP involves having a dislike towards people. XP is all about having a dislike towards people. Entails does not imply given causality, if that's your question. Another interesting question there is, can you say all other options were incorrect and hence we have to choose E? No. Your answer choice, which is correct, will be correct for all the right reasons. It's you're not doing, hey, this all other options are wrong, so this must be the best answer. Not typically true on the GMAT. Your answer choice is correct because it is correct. This, for instance, option E here is the definition of XP that is given to you. It's just the summarized definition of XP. This is practically what we analyzed, right? Hatred towards the strange. Unknown, strange, foreign, all synonyms as far as this particular passage is concerned. The passage itself, the definition involves strange and alien. Is this coming through? The concept is coming through. So let's hide this because I think we have discussed this. So option E is true. Option E is correct, not because option A, B, C, and D are wrong. Firstly, it's because option E is correct. You still eliminate the other option choices. So whoever asked that question, always eliminate option choices. You do not just find an answer and run away. It's a synonym in this case. It's essentially, so the strange or the alien represents people you don't know anything about. Your in-group are the people you know about. So as far as this particular question is concerned, it's absolutely the same. Any other questions on this? Is the concept clear? Good. Good. No other questions? Any other questions? Please put it on the Q&A. All clear. Oh, very good. So you have to eliminate all option choices. An inference can be a restatement of given information. Remember all these things. These are all important. Keep it in mind. Perfect. Let's move on. Good. So again, I will stress again on those points that we just covered. What exactly did we do here? We broke down those big sentences. Yet again, we have faced a lot of big sentences. Remember how we connected line 2 and line 1? That's a key concept of RC. You should be doing that. whenever you see information, you should start making connections, you should start making inferences where possible. You do that while you're doing the passage analysis, you will save yourself a lot of heartburn when you're going through the option choices. Trust me on this, we have seen it all. So remember, that's very important. You saw how we focused on those keywords. Even told you something. Deemed to be told you something. Those were all the keys to you identifying a correct answer choice and eliminating an incorrect option choice. You see how keywords really matter? If that is clear, let's also talk about summarization. In this case, the inference that was drawn was practically the summarized definition. But even otherwise, this practice of constant summarization will really help you do much better on your GMAT. So, a lot of the keywords, good question, how to identify what are the keywords in a passage. A lot of the keywords you typically see once you do even 10 to 15 of the GMAT style questions. You need to go through good questions. You need to go through either the official questions or questions like what we have at e-GMAT, because it's based on everything that e-GMAT has is OG based. It's derived from OG. We really study the OG very hard. So once you've done 10 to 15 good passages, you have an idea about a lot of the keywords, and then you learn as in when you see something. So words like thereby, however, you see this coming across multiple RC passages. You do 10 passages, you will find a lot of words right there which you already see again and again and again. So don't worry about that. Good. Everybody feeling a little confident now about RC? Oh, I'm sorry, there was a question there. I kind of skipped on it. You just put it in the Q&A. We'll handle it. So bring that confidence right now, because now we're going to do, I'm going to show you proof of concept. We are going to actually solve a full-length RC passage. But before we do that, let me once again tell you about the study plan. Because some of you, I notice, have reached out to us about how to go about preparing for the GMAT. So for all of you very serious GMAT aspirants out there who have GMAT on their horizon, one of the key aspects of preparing for an exam like the GMAT, where you really are spending a lot of your time, energy, and money, you need to have a plan, a good plan. You cannot just blanket copy paste a plan from the internet. You need a plan that works for you. You need a plan that is customized to your ability. Everybody has some strengths and weaknesses. For example, RC is one of my strengths. I'm fairly okay with CR. SC I can definitely improve. So everybody has some strength areas, some weakness areas. You need to figure out what works for you. You need a plan that is tailored to your strengths and weaknesses. So the milestones are according to that. You need a plan that will actually tell you what you need to do at what time, because everybody is different. A lot of you have work pressures, so the number of hours you can allot varies. When you're going to write the GMAT varies. So there's so many variables that go into making a good study plan. And more than all this, you also need the power of data. You can study like a blind horse, but if you do it with data, your chances of success are usually much better off. So for all of you serious GMAT aspirants out there, you who want some help from us as far as study plan is concerned, that's a service we actually do for free. We can actually help you out here. If you feel that a study plan is useful, make sure you click on those links. You'll have the session handouts as well. As Rajat explained, remember this particular aspect, study plan with, it's a one-on-one meeting that you have with our certified strategy experts. The problem with that is, unlike a seminar like this, it's not one-to-many, it's one-on-one. Therefore, slots are limited. So those of you who are serious about GMAT, you guys can consider, getting in touch with us on that. So how many of you are ready to do a full-length passage? Confident about it? Not easy, huh? What we're going to do? Good. Perfect. And it's also a little time taking, so let's get into it. Remember to apply all your learnings from the two passages that you just did. Yeah, we'll keep the passage during question solving. It's a long passage, so I have it separately for you. So you should take around 4 minutes to read the passage. After you read the passage, we will have 5 questions to discuss. You will solve 5 questions. After that, we'll get into the discussion, and I'll see how you can apply everything you learned over and over again to a real life GMAT OG passage, which is our 700 level difficulty. So if you guys are ready, for the next 4 minutes, you guys are going to read the passage. I am actually going to switch to a different mode. So you should see the passage right here. If you want, you guys can also read the passage from here. So on the left, you have the notes, the note pane. Your passage is right there. You can read it from there as well. Take 4 minutes to read the passage, and then the questions will be at the bottom right here, one by one. 4 minutes, your time starts now. All right, folks. By now, typically you should have been done reading, but the passage will be there on your left. You can always refer to the note. See, listen, I listen to your feedback. Um, so, question one will be there on your screen. 5 questions back to back. As always, click on still solving before you begin the question. And also make note of whichever answer choice you choose because you're doing 5 at a stretch. And we want to discuss it later. You guys should know which answer choices you chose. Keep a note of that. Here's the first question on your screen. As always, start with still solving. All right, you guys should have been done by now. Let's take another 10 seconds and then we'll go to the second question. Three, two, one, and hold it. So let me take this away. I'm bringing question 2 to your screens. Click on still solving, guys. Once we have a good number of people who have clicked on still solving, then we'll move to question 2. I'll show that. All right, so here's question 2. 'All right, folks, last 10 seconds. You guys should be done by now, typically. 3, 2, 1, and hold. All right, so now let's do question number 3. Same process, folks. Make sure you click on still solving to begin so that we know how many of you are doing this. Perfect. So here's question 3. 5 questions in total, by the way. All right, you guys should ideally be done by now. Let's take another 10 odd seconds. All right. So 3, 2, 1, and that's it. So we have 2 more questions to go. Let me bring the 4th question out for you. Yeah, here it is. As always, same process, guys. Start with still solving. All right. So here's question 4. By the way, penultimate question. So we have just one more question after this, and then we'll discuss this. All right, so you guys should be done by now. Let's take another 10 odd seconds for this. All right, so 3, 2, 1, and that's it. Let me move this out of your way. And it's time for the last question of the day. So you guys have been a very good audience. Let's have fun with the last question. Still solving, guys, as always. All of you who are participating, make sure you click on still solving. There are around 170, 180 of you here. All right, so here's the last question of the day, Q5. All right, let's begin to get those answers in, guys. Final spurt of energy, come on. Last 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and let's hold it. Good. So, if I had to give you a quick overview of how we performed as a group, except for the last question, I think you guys killed it. So, I'm very, very happy to see that. So, now let's get back to the session pane. That way, you guys can also give a little bit of feedback on how this question worked for you. So, the first thing I want you to tell me is how was this question? How was this passage? How did you feel about the passage? Tough but nice, not good, easy. All right. So all types, I guess. Second para was challenging, of course. Passage was very easy, questions were tricky. Medium hard, not too bad. Content was understandable, fair enough. Could not read the entire passage within given time. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get used to that. Don't worry, that's why I kept the passage for you as a reference. All right, so quite a few of you found it tricky, but overall as a group, I think we have definitely shown a lot of improvement from where we started. Remember the first two paragraphs, the first two passages, the second passage, for example, most of us did not get the right answer as a group, but here that's not the case. So I'm very happy to see that. So let's start talking about this particular passage. I hope you guys noticed, noted down all your answers. Now, the one question I have for you, how many of you were able to apply what you learned from the last two? How many of you tried approach 3, not skimming through, not going to the questions? Of course, you could not have gone through the questions, but how many of you really did everything we talked about? Tried summarizing, tried to focus on keywords, try to break down those sentences. Not for 4 and 5. That's the question. Applied, not completely. Tried, All right, we'll see all the answers shortly. Don't worry about that. But it's good. I'm happy to see a lot of you trying, and that's the step one to improving in RC. So let's go to the passage now. Let's understand what this passage is all about. Let me clear all this, and let's get into understanding the particular passage. So we'll come back to this once we have discussed each and every question. So let's begin. FNM, I'm not even going to call them Frazier and Mosteller. For me, they are FNM. I have no intention of calling their names throughout this passage. FNM assert. What is assert? It's a keyword that tells you that FNM are making a particular point. They're asserting a point. They're making a particular assertion. I would pause right here. Strongly convey. Yeah, essentially, it's a point they're trying to make. It's their assertion. So they're stating confidently. I agree with all of you. Fundamentally, it's the point they're making. So FNM make a particular point. The point is medical research could be improved by a move towards larger, simpler clinical trials of medical treatments. So this is something to do with medical research and trials for medical treatments. So seems like we are talking about medicines and trials to see whether medicines seem to work. So it's very one useful aspect in RC is when you're given the first line, it's a good practice to pause right there and try to predict what is going to follow in the rest of the passage. So if I give that to you as a question now, what did the author just say in the first line of the passage? There are these guys called FNM. They make the point that you could improve medical research, you could improve clinical trials from the way it is done currently. How? By moving towards larger and simpler. So this is the first line of the passage. If I had to ask you what is going to follow in this passage, what is the author going to talk about in this passage? Can anyone take a shot at it? It's a useful practice. That's why I'm asking you to do this right now. The how it's done, how it should improve, maybe shortcomings of the current process. It's good. Highlight pros and cons. I like the way you guys are thinking. Drawbacks currently there. Oh, some of you are projecting from the fact that you read this. But the fact is, the minute you read this, you know that, hey, the author made a point. There was a point that was presented. That's FNM's assertion. That medical research, you can improve it by going for something larger and simpler. So one thing you typically expect is why go for larger and simpler? He's going to explain the proposal, right? There is a proposal here. So what is the basis for that proposal? Why really go for larger and simpler? That's a prediction that you make. Okay, this is probably what's going to happen. If that is clear, it's a useful practice as far as RC is concerned. Read the first line, get a sense of what the context is. Now let's move on. Currently is a very important keyword. What does currently tell you? I'm pausing right here when I read this for the first time. Absolutely. What is being done today, how it is currently done. That's the answer I'm looking for. Just by putting the keyword currently, the author is telling you that what follows, the prediction, what follows is the current way of doing things. Somebody wrote it beautifully in the answers there. So FNM has a proposal to improve the clinical trials, the way it is done. Currently, what is happening? That's what you're going to read now. Researchers collect far more background information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. Substantially more than hospitals collect. Let's pause here. Let's understand this. So in the current method, in the current way of doing things, what are these researchers doing? They collect far more background information on each patient than is actually needed for the purpose of the trial. So much so that it's substantially more than what hospitals collect. So that's a comparison. By the way, you always make sure you focus on what we call as comparison words. What is more? The amount of background information that is collected by these researchers doing these clinical trials is substantially or significantly more than what even hospitals collect. How many of you focused on these words? Assert, currently, more. Even that more is important. It's a comparison keyword, end of the day, right? It tells you that there's a comparison between the amount of data collected by hospitals and the amount of data collected by these clinical trials. Good. Those of you who are focusing on this, you're on the right track, and that's what I want you to inculcate. So, as of now, what exactly do we know? Very simple. As per FNM, you can improve medical research by going for larger and simpler. And then the current process is explained. The current method, so much of information is being collected which is strictly not required. So not necessary. Yeah, strictly is important. It tells you it's not required for the trials, even more than what hospitals collect. Thereby, another keyword. What does thereby tell you? Thereby is what we call typically as a absolutely. It's a consequence or conclusion kind of keyword. It tells you as a result what happens, as a consequence what happens. So much background information is collected, which is more than actually what is needed. What happens as a result? Escalating costs of data collection, storage, analysis. Simple, right? All of you are on track with this. Now, we are again going to do what we did in the last passage. We are going to connect line 1, line 2 to line 1. So, in line 1, you were told that how can you improve this? By going towards larger trials and simpler trials. So if I had to ask you what is being talked about here, making it larger or making it simpler, what would you say? In the context of everything you've read so far, what would be a good guess? Are we talking about larger trials or simpler trials? What is the problem right now in the current one? Not exactly both. You're talking about making it simpler. Some of you have got it. Some of you got this. Why? You're making it simpler. The problem with the current method is it collects so much more information than is actually needed. And remember, escalating costs of collecting this data, storing this data, even analyzing this data, you're complicating your process. Isn't that what jumps out at you? If you had to make that connection. I've not even gone to the next line, although that will also give you a bigger clue as to this. But do you guys see we are talking about simpler trials right here before we even jump into the next portion? And it's very, very important to pay attention to this. Yes, absolutely. It seems to be the simpler part. You have to keep an open mind, but it seems like you're talking about making it simpler. So the current problem is way too much background information is collected, more than is actually needed. As a result, you are incurring cost because of collection, storage, even analyzing this extra data, which you may not require. Or in other words, you've complicated something that can be simpler. So keep that in mind. Now let's move on. As somebody pointed out, the next keyword is very important. Although, what does although say? What does although indicate? It's also a keyword, by the way. What does although indicate? Not causality. Somebody said causality. No, no, no. Contrast, absolutely. Some kind of a contrast. Although A happened, B happened. Although X, Y. Some kind of a contrast. So let's figure out what that contrast is. That's my prediction. You see the keyword, you predict what will follow. I know a contrast is coming up. So although limiting information collection could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to a study. Who is saying this, by the way? This particular line? That's another question I have for you. Always keep track of viewpoint also. Yes. So the author makes it very clear when he's telling you something and when FNM is telling you something. FNM assert, FNM content. You're seeing that all across. This is exactly the same as considered to be one definition. See, the author gives you the clues to tell you that, hey, this is something, this may not be what I say. So as long as you keep track of it, you're good. So although limiting information collection could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to a study, FNM content is a keyword. Similar to FNM make the point that such risk never entirely eliminable from research would still be small in most studies. So there's a very interesting point that is being made there. What is the contrast here? Although on one side, if you start limiting information, or in other words, you're making your trial simpler, although if you limit the information that you collect, don't collect so much data. If you do that, although you are definitely increasing the risk that researchers will overlook some relevant facts, as per FNM, this risk is not eliminatable from research in any sense. Or in other words, even if you are only working with two variables or two data points, you will have risk. Even if you're collecting 150 plus or 200 plus data points, you cannot eliminate risk altogether. You will always have some risk. That is the point. You can never eliminate risk. That's the first point that they're trying to tell you. Is this point coming through? FNM are telling you that on one side, great, if you limit the information, that you're collecting, then there is a small risk that can happen. But FNM says you can never eliminate this risk. You can never do that. Whatever you do, even if you collect 1,000 variables, collect as much information as you want, you will still have risk. That's the first point. The second point, whatever this risk is, in most cases, majority of the cases, this risk will be tiny. It will be small. Or in other words, they're telling you, go for it, go for simpler trials. That we are not told what is the risk that cannot be eliminable. No, the passage does not tell you that. There is some risk. For example, there could be some important data about a person's previous disease history, but he's not telling you about it here. You're trying to evaluate a medicine, right? So, let's summarize everything we learned so far. As per FNM, there's a proposal. You can improve your current clinical trial or medical research by going for larger and simpler trials. So it seems that the author is talking about simpler trials now. Why is that? What is the current method and its problem? Way too much data is collected, so much that it's greater than hospital data. As a comparison, he's given you that. As a result, you're incurring costs. You've really complicated the process here. Now, even if you start limiting data, if you start collecting less data, on one hand, that's the contrast. On one hand, you do risk losing out on some relevant facts, but firstly, even if you collect as much information as you want, you collect every possible information on the planet, even then you cannot eliminate risk altogether. You will always have some risk. That's one point. And the second point is, in most cases, this risk is going to be very small. Clarity coming through? It's quite difficult to keep all these points in mind. Don't worry. That's you're learning this. You're in the learning phase right now. It takes time. Is in the risk of missing important facts? That's what we're talking about. We talked about that. So, clarity are things becoming clear? Everything that's been done so far. Now let's move on to the next portion. Only is another word. Some kind of a very, very specific thing is being said. Only in research on entirely new treatments are new and unexpected variables likely to arise. So what the author is telling you is, you have to connect this with the last line. The author told you, first of all, you cannot eliminate risk, whatever you do. Second, most cases the risk is small. There is only one case where this risk is significant. That case is what is mentioned in the last sentence. Overall, if you had to summarize what the author is trying to tell you, in this paragraph, the author first introduced us to FNM's proposal, make it larger, make it simpler. It seems like what is explained here is, why go for simpler? It's FNM's proposal. It's FNM's proposal which the author is presenting. Although I will say that in this question, the author seems to be in complete agreement. And the reason I say that is, you see everywhere the author is providing data to back up FNM's proposal. So it seems like the author is in agreement with FNM, though it's not explicitly stated. So that's something you need to keep in mind. So a question on timing. A long passage, a complicated passage, you can still do it in 4 minutes, and less than or equal to 1 minute for each question. So we will discuss timing later, don't worry about it. But the quick and short summary is, less than or equal to 4 minutes to read the passage, less than or equal to 1 minute to solve each and every question. You analyze at this level, No question will take you more than 1 minute. And I saw that, by the way. There were some of you who were answering questions within 15 seconds. Correct answer being chosen within 15 seconds. So don't worry about it. So I hope you guys are understanding this. So if you had to summarize this paragraph, the author introduced a proposal, FNM's proposal, and then the author took one aspect of that proposal. What are the benefits if you go for a simpler trial? Or in other words, he's pushing the case for going for a simpler trial. Now, let's also do one thing. I told you that after every paragraph, you should also summarize. We summarize the paragraph now. Now, if I ask you the question, what is going to follow in the next paragraph? Who can tell me that? FNM's proposal was introduced. The proposal is go for larger, go for simpler. In this paragraph, he's now explained why should you go for simpler. What will follow in the next paragraph? Absolutely. You can also, in a very rare case, you can also elaborate further on why go for simpler. But at some point, you're expecting to see larger. You guys are getting it. If you're able to have this understanding and predict this going forward, your analysis of paragraph 2, some of you struggled with paragraph 2, your analysis of paragraph 2 will shoot through the roof if you go in with this understanding. You're expecting to see why go for larger. Now let's go for it. FNM propose not only, beautiful keyword. So not only means not just this, there's something else also. Pause right there, understand that, then move on. And you have that next word, but also. FNM propose not only that researchers limit data collection on individual patients, but also that researchers enroll more patients in clinical trials. Now, very important question for you. I want you guys to connect this to line 1 of your passage, the first line. The first line said larger and simpler, right? Which of this is larger? Which of this is simpler? What is larger here? What is simpler here? Let's start with that. One of those things is simpler, one of those things is larger. I think you guys can figure it out. So limit data is simpler, absolutely. You see how the author is connected. It's all connected. In line 1, he told you larger and simpler. The rest of paragraph 1 was explaining why simpler. Now he's building from paragraph 1. So it's not only go for simpler, but also go for larger. So what is larger in this context? More people in your clinical trials. So I'll give you a simple example to understand this. Patient pool, absolutely. Imagine that you're trying to find a medicine for the coronavirus. Simple. If you are doing a clinical trial, there is this medicine that is being tested. So a simpler trial would mean instead of capturing every possible background information about the patient, you just capture some relevant data points. That is a simpler trial. What is a larger trial given this context? Instead of testing on just 200 people, test on 500 people. Patient pool, as somebody put it very, very succinctly. Are you guys seeing how the connection is being made between the paragraphs? What this should tell you is GMAT RC passages are written with a beautiful structure. It is for you to unlock it. How many of you see the connection here? Larger and simpler is again being mentioned here, right? Connecting back to the last one. Yes. This is the level where you get 90th percentile, trust me. See it clear as day. That's a good one. That's a good one. So let's go through this. FNM proposed not only that, hey, make it simpler, that is limit the data collection, don't collect so much information and complicate things, but also make it larger. Researchers, you enroll more patients. Instead of 200 people, you do for 500 people. Who's stopping you? Thereby, yet again a keyword, obtaining a more representative sample of the total population with the disease under study. I think that's fairly easy to understand. And again, you notice how I'm focusing on all these keywords. Thereby tells me I'm looking at as a consequence, as a result. Often, so a good number of times, you cannot say most, but majority of most of the times you can say, let's say that. Very often, researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. All right. What does that tell you? You're talking about which method here? The current one or the proposed one? That's the question for you. Current one or proposed one? What is being talked about? Current one. Perfect. Another question for you. Who's making this point? Is it the author or is it FNM? Good. I was just testing to see whether you guys are keeping track of that. It's very important. So it seems like the author is somewhat in agreement, though he doesn't explicitly state. End of the day, he's only presenting FNM's proposal here, but he seems to be backing it up with all kinds of necessary data points. So unique passage that way. But good, as long as you're keeping track of it, it's good. So often researchers restrict study participants to patients who have no ailments. Or in other words, if you're testing for corona, I'm not going to worry about whether that person, I'm going to take in people who have only corona. I'm not going to take in people who have corona and diabetes. I'm not going to take in people who have corona and asthma. Do you guys understand this? What that line means? It's as simple as that, right? Who have no other ailments besides those being studied. Absolutely. Nice analogy. Thank you. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. What is the problem with this? Is this a benefit or is this a drawback? That's an interesting question for you. If it's a drawback, why is it a drawback? Or if it's a benefit, why is it a benefit? Feel free. Because it's a very important inference to be made here. Rework required, limited scope. Those answers are on the right track. It's restrictive, absolutely. Some of you are getting this perfectly. For the rest of you, what does this mean? Essentially, first you're testing under ideal conditions, people who have no other ailments. But what does the author tell you? A treatment, a treatment that is successful in that condition, you have to then evaluate under normal conditions also. Because in reality, if your corona medicine goes out, a lot of the people, a lot of your patients who will receive that medication will also have diabetes. They will also have asthma. You have to test your medicine for normal conditions, real life conditions. So it's actually a drawback written without mentioning the word drawback. Why is it a drawback? You're having to test 2 times. You're not testing the same group of guys, but you still have to do 2 rounds of test. First, you're testing under ideal conditions, but that is not directly applicable. You cannot just introduce the medicine after this ideal test conditions. Then you're having to again test it under normal conditions. Is that concept coming through? Clear now, but not before. Okay. Drawback still in positive means can be. Think about it. A lot of you have said yes again. So think about it. What is being told here? Often researchers restrict study participation to people who have no ailments apart from those being studied. Very simple. If I'm testing for corona, I'm not going to consider those who have corona plus diabetes. I will only consider people under corona. What is the problem with that? In real life, can you introduce this medicine into the market? No, because in real life, a lot of the people who will take your corona medicine will have diabetes. What if this medicine should not be given to a person who has diabetes also? Then great problem, right? You're going to face problems if you just introduce that drug into the market. Clarity? Ideal versus normal, absolutely. So the problem with the current approach is you're having to do it, you have to do another round of testing. The author is in this option is nowhere supporting the current practice. Analogy, okay, perfect. So I think if there are some more questions here, please put it on the Q&A. We can help you out there. So that's here, she will definitely help you out. The author is not nowhere in this argument is nowhere in this passage is the author supporting the current practice. By the way, the author is presenting to you FNM's proposal, and he's also giving data to in support of that. Exactly, the author seems to be wanting to improve the current practice too. He's not. He's essentially presenting to you FNM's proposal in the simplest way, but he's telling you what are all the problems with the current practice. So let's move on with this paragraph. There's one more portion of it. FNM propose, yet again, that word is important. So what is the point that FNM are making? Not only researchers, okay, this is actually the same point, right? We might have actually come to the same line. Here is the one. Broadening the range of trial participants as per FNM would enable researchers to evaluate a treatment's efficacy for diverse patients under various conditions and to evaluate its effectiveness for different patient subgroups. If I had to summarize this, what exactly is being told? He is supportive of FNM's proposal, not current, whoever is confused there. At least he seems to be supportive. He's not overtly told anything, by the way. Increasing the number of patients. Broadening the number of trial participants. As per FNM, it would help in some way. That's what is being told, right? Benefits of a larger pool study. It would enable researchers to do something. It can help you evaluate under more diverse patients, more diverse patient subgroups. Or in other words, what you discussed earlier, right? Now, the problem with the current method was your sample was not representative of the population. Now, if you broaden the range of participants, your sample will represent reality. It will represent the population better. That's why, because you're having diverse patients, various conditions, etc., etc. So by increasing the size of the trial, there are these benefits that you can get. You will be able to evaluate whether your medicine actually works for different types of patients, different types of patient groups, etc., etc. Is this coming through? Fundamentally, at a very structural level, you know from the first paragraph, from your prediction, you know that he's going to talk about larger study. He's basically telling you why go for a larger study. Isn't that so? What is the benefit of going for a larger study? By broadening the range of trial participants, or in other words, by going for a larger study, you have these benefits. You'll be able to evaluate this efficacy much better. You'll be able to evaluate effectiveness for different groups. All that is being mentioned to you. It's as simple as that. Very simple level, benefits of going for larger trial. Is this clear? Are we all on the same page now? Of course, it's discussed in details, but you need to understand it right here. So good. For example, very important keyword. How many of you paused when you saw for example? And these are all the small things that if you pay attention to, you'll never lose. The minute you saw this, the question you should have asked is, what is this an example for? You do it right there in the analysis. When you saw the question, your fourth question was essentially this question, right? What exactly is that example for? I understand this in my passage analysis. And then when I go to the question, I take less than 1 minute to solve that question. That's how I do it. And that's how we at e-GMAT do it. It's an example for what? Author's point, but what point? That's very important. What point specifically? To get the answer to that question, here's the trick. What is it an example of? You go back to what was there in the previous line. What was the previous line talking about? For example is continuing from the previous line, right? So look at the previous line. What was being mentioned? The benefit of going for a larger trial, right? By going for a larger trial, you will be able to evaluate efficacy, effectiveness, etc., etc. As an example for that, now you're given these points. Why they should enroll wide range of patients. Perfect. Do you guys see the value of doing this? Right here, when you see this, for example, ask that one question. Take 1 second, ask that question. What is this an example of? You do this, you'll take no time in answering that question. Don't worry, again we're going to discuss time. It's because we are explaining it that it seems so time consuming. When you are solving this as a student on the exam, you can do all this in less than 4 minutes. Trust me, we all do it. We don't get success stories otherwise. Obviously, we do it. Don't worry. And we'll discuss time after this. So, example for the benefits of going for a big trial, going for a larger, this one in the clinical trial. So, two examples are given. Progressive disease, value of a treatment for a progressive disease. That's a case again, different diverse patient. That's an example of diverse patients. Patients who have multiple stages of diseases, not just somebody in the early stages of corona, maybe somebody in the later stages of corona. So that can have an impact on whether the treatment works. Another example, patients' ages. So that probably talks about subgroups. So one subgroup of patients is young, one subgroup of patients is senior citizens. So as an example for what was given previously, you are given this. So the inference you should have made from the last, this one was, the problem with the current method, you have to do 2 steps. You're testing under ideal, then you have to test under normal. Only after that your drug can go live. Perfect. How would your notes be in the pad? We'll discuss it in some time. You can ask that to Rajat once we're done with this. That's a good question, by the way. You should ask that. Are we clear? Shall we move to questions? Perfect. So very quickly, as always, I keep telling you there's a power to summarization. What exactly happened in this passage? FNM, the author introduced us to FNM's proposal. What is a proposal? Make your trials larger, make it simpler. What was discussed in the first paragraph? Why go for simpler? What was discussed in the second paragraph? Why go for larger? Very simple, right? So essentially, all the author has done is he's discussed this particular proposal of FNM, which has 2 aspects: larger, simpler. Simple? I mean, simple for you, not simpler the trial. If this is clear, now we can go to the questions. So we will be able to go a little quicker through the questions because we have done this level of passage analysis. And by the way, this is what you see when you actually do this kind of passage analysis, even for you when you're solving it. So let's look at the first question. The passage is primarily concerned with, or in other words, main point. Simple, right? Main point. Because we have done this level of analysis, doing the pre-thinking for this is very easy. By the way, just like in CR, as in all possible questions, you should do pre-thinking in RC. If you do that pre-thinking, again, your chances of getting the correct answer within good time is much, much better. So we have already discussed this, so we can move on fast. Essentially, what happened in this passage, the author introduced us to FNM's proposal. That proposal has these 2 aspects: larger, simpler. In one paragraph, simpler was discussed. In the other paragraph, larger was discussed. That's about it. This is all you need. If you do this bit of pre-thinking, you know what the passage is about. Your main point is fundamentally the summary of the passage. What exactly is the core central idea of the passage? It's a summary. Let's go to option choices. Let me bring how your responses for this question. I told you, in most of the cases, you guys have done very well. So let's bring question 1. So the correct answer is option D. 50% of the batch got it. Unfortunately, another 50% of the batch went wrong in this question. But I think you guys will find it very, very easy at this point of time, now that we have discussed this at this level. Option D is the correct answer, guys. So let's quickly understand why. Let's look at option A. Very few of you choose option A, so I'm not going to spend too much time. It says identifying two practices in medical research. Is the main purpose of the passage simply to identify two practices, or to say, hey, you can improve the current process by, if you can improve this one practice by going for this other practice? It's not just identifying two practices, right? It goes far beyond that. Do you guys see why option A is wrong to begin with? It's a proposal. It's not about identifying two practices. Absolutely. Those who chose option A, I hope it is clear. Another reason why option A is wrong, there is this word accuracy of clinical trials. Does this passage talk about accuracy at all? We talk about effectiveness, there is mention of information collection, there's talk about efficacy, that's also a very strictly medical term, which we didn't bother with, by the way, because you're not expected to be a subject matter expert. But nowhere in this argument have we actually discussed this thing called accuracy. Does the passage say, for example, that the new method will give you more accurate results than the old method? Does the passage say that? I'm covering accuracy right here because accuracy of the trial keeps coming up in a lot of these questions as one of the option choices. Anywhere you have chosen an option choice because of the word accuracy, you guys are wrong. Nowhere in this passage do we actually discuss accuracy. So that should give you some clarity. Nowhere does it say, hey, the new method will give you more accurate test results than the old method. No, vice versa also never mentioned. The passage does not talk about accuracy. So keep that in mind. Option A, not the correct answer. Option B, thankfully none of you chose. Let's not discuss it now. But basically cost is not discussed at all in this context. Option C was somewhat popular. 23% of you chose option C. It was the most popular incorrect option choice. The problem with option C, if you're choosing option C, I know for a fact that you guys are not spending time understanding what this means, option C actually means. You are skimming through the option the same way you are maybe skimming through the passage. What you have to break it down. What is to evaluate? Did we discuss what is evaluate? What is evaluate? Who can tell me what is evaluate? Pros and cons. Analyze the pros and cons. Absolutely. So, in this passage, shortcomings of current medical practice, that is discussed. The problems with the current medical practices that are talked about, that's true. But is the author telling us the pros and cons of these particular shortcomings? That's the question you need to ask. Is the author talking about the pros and cons of the shortcomings of current medical research practices? This word is innocently put here, but he's analyzing, but is he evaluating the analysis? He's analyzing. Okay, he's given you some analysis of shortcomings. That much I can give you. But has he evaluated the analysis? Look at what the option is telling you. Read option C properly. Are you evaluating the analysis? That's the question. Those who chose option C, a lot of you chose option C. Do you see why option C is not the correct answer here? There is no way option C can be correct. Shortcomings is discussed. So you can say at some level there is an analysis of shortcomings presented. Till there you're okay. But does the author evaluate the analysis? Does the author tell you these are the pros of this analysis, these are the cons of this analysis? No, right? I am not 100%. Think about it. You're not thinking through. Are you evaluating an analysis or are we talking about shortcomings? Think about it. This is what happens when you do not break down your option choices. The way you break down the passage, you have to understand what the option choice tells you exactly. The shortcomings are mentioned. Analysis of shortcomings, all right, that also is given to you. So the author does present to you the shortcomings of the current method. Perfect. Is he evaluating an analysis? Is he telling you, hey, these are the pros of this analysis of shortcomings? These are the cons of this analysis of shortcomings. Does that happen anywhere? Evaluating is the key differentiator. It's not happening anywhere. Somebody put it in the best way possible. No evaluation whatsoever. That's why option C is wrong. For those of you who chose option C, I hope this brings a bit of clarity. Read the option choice a little better. Option D is the correct answer. It tells you exactly what's happening, right? End of the day, it's describing those proposed changes, FNM's changes. Somebody asked about option E, so let's discuss it. The problem I have with option E is this. How do you know it's likely to change? There is a current way of doing things. The author presents a proposal for a new way of doing things. Where are we given that this change is likely to happen? Likely means it's probable, it's going to happen. There's a good chance that it will happen. How can you say it's going to happen, or there's a good chance of it happening? This is not something that's true, right? You don't know this. He is presenting in option D, he's describing FNM's proposal. That's absolutely true. Proposing the changes that FNM are suggesting. Do you guys, for those of you, some of you chose option E. 13% of the batch chose option E. Do you see why option E is wrong, by the way? The problem I have with that is it's likely to change. You have no idea about likely to change. How can you make an inference there? How can you say it's likely to change? You don't know that. Good. I'm happy to see that. What does that teach you? You cannot be you have to be extremely careful as far as RC is concerned. It's very, very easy to go wrong. Just this likely to change makes a huge difference. You have to put your option choices through a microscope if you want to do well in RC. Likely to change, that should tell you option E is wrong. Evaluating an analysis, that should tell you option C is wrong. It discusses shortcomings, it does not evaluate the analysis. That should tell you option C is wrong. Very, very, very important. Don't skip any keyword. Absolutely. So shall we go to option B, the second question? Question 2. Perfect. Question 2. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage about the study about which group is being talked about here? That's also a key point in RC. You have to understand the question, you have to understand the option choice. If you don't do all this, you put in all the effort in passage analysis. We showed you 3 ways you can improve in passage analysis. But after that, if you don't put the effort in answering the questions, understanding what the question is asking you, understanding each and every option choice properly, the intended meaning of the option choice, the end result may not be favorable to you. So understand what the option choice is. Here we need to find what can be inferred about which study, the study under ideal conditions, right? What do you mean by ideal conditions? Those patients who have no other ailments. So the current way, the ideal testing, that study of ideal patients under ideal conditions. What can be inferred about that? With this question stem in mind, then I proceed to pre-thinking. Only in the second paragraph are we discussing this. Nowhere in the first paragraph are we talking about this. So that immediately gives me an idea about where to focus. Nothing from the first paragraph will probably fit here. I need to, and where are we talking about this ideal condition? Here, this portion. Often researchers restrict study information to those who have no ailments besides those being studied. That is what you mean by ideal conditions. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated under normal condition. This is the only relevant portion talking about ideal conditions. All my answers will come from here. So what do I know about ideal conditions? The one thing I know is these guys have no other ailments. Therefore, the results of this, you cannot apply it to real life. You have to do a step 2. Does that make sense? We will wrap up shortly, don't worry. And don't worry, these videos will all be there if somebody has a hard stop. You will get video, you'll get session handouts, you'll get the whole works. Don't worry about it. We'll try wrapping it up very soon. So point one, you know it's not ideal conditions. Therefore, there is this additional extra test that has to be done. As a result, what can you say about this particular study? It's not applicable to real life, or in other words, the results are limiting. If you have thought this much in your pre-thinking, you will find that option A is the correct answer. How many of you chose option A? Like I said, in terms of results, a lot of you have done well, but it's still only around 50-60% of the batch in general. So for the remaining 40%, there's still a lot to learn. You guys can still improve by leaps and bounds, trust me. So I'm just bringing in the results here. Option A is the correct answer. 56% of the batch got this, which means 56% of the batch spot on. Limited applicability, it's as per your pre-thinking. So let's look at the option choices that were popular. So let's look at option D. Yeah, option D is slightly tricky, but it's actually not relevant. Remember, the only place where information collection is talked about is the first paragraph in a completely different context. Information collection only mentioned in the first para in a completely different context. All we know about information collection is in the current method, that is in this method, a lot of information is collected. That much we know. We don't know anything else. Do we know for sure that risk can be avoided if they stop collecting data? Let me put it this way. If there was not much risk and you can stop collecting data, then why do you have a step 2? After testing in ideal conditions, you're not ready to put it in the market yet. You know that there's still some risk if you put it in the market because you're only testing under ideal conditions. Isn't that why you test again? If that is true, can you really be sure that just because if you collect less information, there will be lesser risk? I mean, there won't be an increase in risk. Can you say anything about that? For those of you who fell for option D, data collection or information collection, first para, completely different context. Do you guys see this now? Question in the Q&A on this if you guys have any question. Otherwise, I'm assuming that you guys are clear. All of you who chose option D, is the concept coming through? Good. Let's look at option E, which was also chosen. 11% of you chose it. But now you should know why you should reject it. Accuracy. We already discussed this in the first question. Do we know anything about accuracy in this question? No, right? Would be, would not be, we don't know. The problem is, for whoever asked the question, it's a good question. The problem is we still have no idea about accuracy. Maybe, maybe not, would be, would not be, I don't know. How do you know? We have not discussed accuracy in this passage at all. Or the author did not bring it up, FNM did not bring it up. You could easily confuse it with effectiveness, but you have to understand what those two mean. Honestly, the easiest way to go about it is, does the author talk about it? No. It's a specific term the author did not talk about in this passage. There's no way it can be the correct answer. Everywhere, that's why I discussed accuracy in the first question. If you thought about this, you fell for a trap. How can ideal condition have limited applicability? We just discussed it. Because ideal condition is people who don't have any other ailment. In real life, people have multiple other ailments. Somebody who has corona may also have diabetes. Your medicine should work in that case also. That's why it has limited applicability. We discussed this already. So let's move on to question 3. If you have a question, do put it in the Q&A as well. That way we can run through this a little faster. Let's look at question 3. Again, a very interesting question. What is the advantage of that ideal study, the current way of doing studies? In this case, again, patients who have no other ailments besides those being studied. Did you guys understand the question when you read it? Essentially, what is the advantage of a study which is the current way, the ideal study, people who have no other ailments. On one side, we know that there are so many problems. The problems of that have been listed so well in the passage. Hey, because it's under ideal conditions, it's not applicable to real life. That much has been given. But what is the advantage of that? What is there any advantage to that? That is what this question is asking us. That's what this question is asking us. So again, come to the specific section if you need to, where this is being talked about. We'll come to this if we need this. Yeah. So what do we know about the given way? Everybody in the ideal setup, we are only looking at patients who have only the ailment of concern. If you're testing for corona, we don't care about people who have corona and diabetes. We don't care about this group. What does it mean? In terms of what you have to study, you don't have to worry about all those other variables, whether they have some other diseases, whether they are male or female, or whether they have some other genetic issues that can complicate your medicine. You don't care about all that in the ideal setup. All you're looking at is no other ailment. I am looking only at corona. In other words, what does it mean? You don't have to worry about so many variables here. Is it not? What do you mean? Complicated research. Yeah, of course, it's medical research. That's why it's there. It's complicated, but that's why we're here to understand it. So is this clear? One advantage you can infer is you're not bothered about all these other ailments they may have. So it limits the number of variables you have to study. You don't have to worry about all those other things. All you're looking at is corona and only corona. That's the only factor you're concerned with. So we can skip through this. I think you guys understand this, but if there's a question, we'll take it. So if any of you fell for option A, yet again, I will point you to that one word, that is accuracy. Something that's nowhere discussed in the passage. So 9% of the batch chose option A. Again, you guys should really pay attention to not just accuracy. This is wrong because of accuracy. You don't know whether these findings will be more accurate. Nowhere does the passage talk about that. Even this section is not right. You don't know whether it will yield more data. That's not mentioned. Let's look at the second one. Option B was badly discussed. Option C was the correct answer. 60% of the batch got the correct answer. I'm happy to see that. And some of you got this within 10-15 seconds. So for those of you who are saying that, hey, time, how do you do all this in time? It's possible, it's doable. I see proof of concept in this very room. There are some of you who are doing this perfectly. And what I'm telling you is all of you can do it. All it takes is a bit of practice, not too much, a bit of practice. 10-15 passages with the correct process and you guys are set. So option C is correct. It's exactly what we arrived at in pre-thinking. Options D and E were also somewhat chosen. The problem with option D is it goes the other way. It's actually not an advantage of this study. It's an advantage of the proposed study. It's only in the proposed study that you're looking at all these patient subgroups and all, right? In this study, you're not even looking at that variable. How can this be an advantage? Some of you chose option E as well. Another 14% of you chose option E. For you, the first question is, what is this word experimental treatment? What is experimental treatment? Is it something you know from the passage? Are you assuming that clinical trial is the same as experimental treatment? Do we know it's the same? How many of you, those of you who fell for option E? The first question, experimental treatment. Are we looking at experimental treatment? What is experimental treatment? You don't know. That's one reason you should reject option E outright. I'll give you another reason. You're talking about average patient. This particular option choice talks about the average patient. It says it will enable researchers to assess the value for average patient. What is average patient? Normal condition or ideal condition? If you had to take a shot, would you say it's normal condition or ideal condition? Your average patient. Ideally, it should be normal. Yeah, now I'm seeing a lot more of the regular folks here. Typically, when you say average, you say normal. That's what average is, right? Your average guy is your normal guy. That's another reason you should reject. It's actually telling you something else. Firstly, you don't know anything about experimental treatment. And even if this was the same treatment, it was relevant to the trial, it tells you that it will help you it will help you to evaluate all this for the average patient. But what is the focus of this question? Ideal conditions, not your average, not your regular. Another reason why you should be wary of option E. So you see how we are breaking down every single thing that we see here. You need to put your option choices through a microscope. So let's come to question 4, and this should be easy. Even in passage analysis, I told you, this is what we call as a function or purpose question. In this passage, why did the author mention patient's age? Very simple, right? Did we discuss this in our passage analysis? I asked you to ask this fundamental question. When you see, for example, ask that question. What is it an example for? If you did that, then answering this question less than equal to 1 minute. It's an example for the benefit of the larger trial, right? Wasn't that our pre-thinking? Why go for larger trial? It can help evaluate all these other things. Effectiveness, it can help effectiveness, efficacy, different diverse patients. Benefit of larger trial, example for that, these things were given. If you got that, beautiful. Let's look at the correct option for this question. This is a penultimate question, and let's look at question 4. Yep. And again, 70% of the batch, you guys are getting this. Some of you fell for some of these other this ones. Do we know that age is the most critical variable? Nowhere does it say. Maybe it's not age. Maybe it is any other factor like progressive stage of disease. Maybe it is gender. Maybe it is genetics. How do we know it is age? Finally, one. That's a good one. We don't know age is the most critical variable. Most critical is too strong. We don't know. It's just one of the it's just one example mentioned. We don't know if that example is mentioned for the reason that hey, it is the most critical variable. Not necessary. How do you know? So age is the most critical variable. That's the reason this is not the correct answer. Option B was not chosen. Option C was somewhat popular, but it's actually the different example, right? As an example for the benefit of larger trial, there were 2 points mentioned. One was about progressive diseases, the other was about age. Option C is just giving you the other example. It is not the purpose of the example. It is the other example for the same purpose. Do you guys see the beauty of option C? Why it's so incorrect? Just to confuse you, because those fancy terms are there, progressive diseases, they very cleverly just put in the other example to confuse you. Some of you fell for this. 17% of the batch fell for this. Those who got this wrong, do you see it now? Isn't this simply the other example? Without getting into any other things. It's like Judua too. All right, that's a good one. Let's look at option D. Illustrate a point about the value. Okay, this is exactly the purpose as per our pre-thinking. If you've done this in passage analysis, the minute I see this, I know this is the correct answer. I'm only looking at option E for the sake of completeness. You really have to eliminate everything. So, option E, substantiate an argument about the problems inherent in enrolling large number. It's trying to tell you the benefit of large number. Option E is telling you the other way, problems of large number. It's actually opposite. I'm happy to see most of you did not choose this. Otherwise, there's something fundamentally wrong here. So good. With that, we come to the last question of the day. According to the passage, which of the following describes a result of the way in which researchers generally conduct trials? So this is a question where I see that we have struggled a little bit compared to some of the other questions. So let's talk about the one option that confused all of you. And that option is option number C. Let me broadcast the results. All right. So what is it we need to find in this question? What is an outcome, result or outcome of the way in which generally trials are conducted? Or in other words, an outcome of the current method. So the current method is discussed both in paragraph 1 and in paragraph 2. So let's understand everything we know about the current method and try to arrive at the outcomes that are there. From the first paragraph, one thing I can say is in the current method, lot more data is collected than is actually needed. What is the consequence of that, or what is the outcome of that? You are given that escalating costs of data collection. So you're spending more money, costs are more. That's one outcome. Another outcome of the ideal way of doing things of the current method. What is the problem? Because you're testing initially in the ideal way, you have to do a step 2. The outcome is 2 steps. You're not done with testing in one phase. You have to do another test in real life conditions or normal conditions. That is another outcome. This is all you need. This is all you have from the 2 paragraphs about the current method. With these 2 thoughts in mind, I go to the option choices. And 37% of the batch got the correct answer for this question. This comes from the first paragraph. You know they expend resources. We were given they spend cost, escalating cost of data collection storage. Money is also a resource. So they expend resources on information storage. As per the passage you're already given, which are likely to be irrelevant to the study. Do you guys see option C? For those of you who did not choose option A, for those of you who did not choose option A, do you see why option A should be the correct answer? The passage tells you that. Actually, let me bring the passage here that might be useful for this question. The passage tells you as much, right? You're collecting more information than is strictly required. What does that mean? Absolutely. Somebody pointed that out. Absolutely. Far more data than is strictly required, which means you're collecting irrelevant data. So I hope that is clear. Otherwise, do pop in the Q&A. We'll help you out as always. Let's look at option C, which is also, again, option B. We discussed this. Accuracy is the theme of the evening of incorrect option choice. Wherever you see accuracy, we already discussed it. Nowhere is it discussed in this passage. That's why those of you who chose, 10% of you who chose option B, you should know why it's wrong. Option C, it's a very popular incorrect option choice. They avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might affect their findings. Who can tell me why option C is not the correct answer? Absolutely. We discussed that. The point about the risk never being completely eliminatable no matter what. Even if you collect only 2 data points, only 2 types of information, you will have risk. You collect 2000 plus data points also, you will still have some risk. Or in other words, you can never avoid the risk. You may be able to reduce the risk, but you cannot avoid the risk. That's very, very clearly given to you. Risk is like Thanos. Thank you. That's interesting. So that's why option C is wrong. I think a lot of you have understood this, but those of you who chose option C, is that coming through? I got all 5 correct. Fantastic. So those of you who chose option C, clarity. Options D and A were not particularly chosen. Option D talks about a type of risk that is not mentioned in the passage. Do we anywhere talk about, is it mentioned that, hey, too much information is analyzed and because of that facts are overlooked? They use all the same terms, analyzing information, overlooking of facts, but the combination is wrong. Nowhere are we discussing this. So go through this when you get the time. Option D is also nowhere the correct answer. Let's now wrap this up. So what did we learn from all this? You just solved a 700 level OG question. What did you learn from this? I'll give you my side of the learnings, but I also want to hear from you. Again, I start with this. The motivation matters. Get yourself immersed in RC, learn to enjoy RC. You need 730, you need 730 plus as a score, you need 90th percentile ability. To do that, you cannot do a half-baked attempt. You really have to immerse yourself 100%. You see the level of analysis we have done. You think it is possible to do this without 100% immersion? In-depth analysis is the main approach. I really like that. RC and CR are interrelated. Thank you. Of course, that's something we want you to take away from this as well. Read the passage, never skim. After today, I don't want to see any of you skimming the passage. That's a recipe for disaster. The three strategies we talked about: break down those large sentences, make active connections. You saw in this passage how we connected the starting line of the second paragraph to the first paragraph, how we figured out that, hey, this guy is talking about larger trial here. In the last paragraph, you see he seems to be talking about simpler trial. All those connections you should be making, all those inferences you should be making. We inferred about the drawback. It was not written that, hey, this is a drawback, but we could infer it from the way it was written. You need to make all those points. We saw a ton of keywords in this passage across both the paragraphs. You saw how we paused at that keyword and understood why did the author actually put that there. Example, for example, the minute you ask that question, hey, what is this an example for? You got one question right. Your question 4 is right. Just if you do that right then and there. Summarize. We have done this throughout the session. Every few lines, you remember the first two passages, we summarized those complicated definitions. And even here, we summarized at the end of each paragraph, we summarized, and you found how it was useful to you. So I hope this was useful to you. I think Rajat is here. So I invite Rajat to take over the rest of the session. Thank you for your time.
All right, guys. So thank you for that feedback, and Harsha, thank you for that phenomenal session. Harsha, I think you're still your microphone's still enabled. So yes, I mean this was a mammoth session, and I was not there during the session, but I was there for the last 10 minutes or so, and I enjoyed it. And I've conducted the session probably 50 times, so if I enjoyed it, I think you guys probably got a lot out of it as well. So one thing that I would say, other than the takeaways that is there, is that that when you think about GMAT RC, it's about a process, and it's about inculcating a process while and just making sure you inculcate it so well that it becomes second nature to you, and so that's something that you've got to do. And again, why do you need to do this? Because you want all of this. You want to get to a top B school. You don't want to pay a whole lot for it, and you want to make the money that a top B school grad does make over here. In this case, so let's talk about timing over here. Um, so what happens to timing when you do this? Actually, you end up saving time. When you do this, you end up saving a ton of time over here. And we say that because this is based on data, not so much because I am saying that you shouldn't believe it. You should believe it because of the kind of success that we've delivered. And when you want to look at the kind of success that we've delivered, look at the last 6 months, look at the last 2 years, look at the last 5 years. And then I specifically said the last 5 years because 5 years ago, GMAT Club decided to really only honor reviews where the student provides an actual score report as evidence of score improvement. And then you would really see that the only company that has consistently garnered reviews since then is e-GMAT, especially for verbal. No other company post 2015. Till 2015, most of the other companies had reviews. Post 2015, it's just e-GMAT that has had reviews. So there's data to back it up. But let's kind of tell you what does that data actually mean over here. So there are two ways to go about doing this. You can read the passage quickly, and reading the passage quickly for most people means that you actually end up spending 2 minutes reading the passage. Let me just go to the quick read method over here, which is the fast reading. You take 2 minutes reading a passage, but then because you have to go back and spend so much time on the passage, what's going to happen is that you need about a minute and a half to 2 minutes answering each question. So overall, you'd still end up taking 8 minutes per passage when you do that because you're spending more time answering questions. On the other hand, if you inculcate this habit, you're going to be able to get to a point where you're able to read a passage. Most of those passages you'd be able to read them in 3 minutes. And trust me, this happens. You may not believe it today. You do 15 passages, you understand how keywords are used, you get into the habit of reading and summarizing. Um, uh, and, 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 and and what you're going to find is that that just becomes second nature to such a degree that you'd be able to do that in 3 minutes. And for the most challenging passages, and this wasn't the most challenging passage, by the way, this was a reasonable a passage which was challenging to a reasonable degree, not the most challenging one. Even for those, you'd take about 4 minutes, which means uh, 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 you'd be able to get to uh, 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 the entire passage in about 7 to 8 minutes or so. Okay, so there are about 4G passages in RC. You would take between, I'd say, 25 to 28 minutes, yes, on RC overall. Yes, that's something that's going to happen. And again, it's 1/3 of your verbal section. So, and it takes slightly longer on this. The beauty of this is because you spend so much time reading a passage, you don't spend time answering a passage and answering questions, and it helps you in two ways. One is it saves time, but the second thing is it gives you confidence. It reduces that mental friction. How many of you who've taken a mock test or have taken the actual test find that, hey, your brain's so tired towards the end, it just feels like giving up? How many of you feel that that has happened with you? Yes. The reason why that happens towards the end, especially towards the last 10 or 15 questions, is because if you're doing a lot of back and forth, it increases that mental friction, and that reduces your ability to concentrate throughout the test over there. So it's, yes, some of you feel that pressure of a mock test, but for many of you, if you do that back and forth, it's that mental friction that does that. Now, if you read the passage first, you will reduce that back and forth by up to 80%, and you'd find that towards the end you're way more energetic over there. So, and let me just, I talked about data. Here's some data over here. Here's one of our former students, Anastasia. She really said, hey, you should read all the text, not just the first and last sentence of each paragraph. As long as you understand the whole paragraph, she means the passage, it takes only 30 to 50 seconds to answer each question. And I can actually share links to these. You can watch these success stories. So again, don't believe what I say. Look at evidence. And as you look at evidence, you're going to really find the same thing over here. Let me also share. So the links above are GMAT club debriefs. The links below are their interviews over there. Okay. And again, what she says is read with what we call as the SC hat. For those of you who attended our SC session, you know how we read a sentence, how we break it down. In fact, we have a course in which we teach you how to read a sentence over there. It's called the Master Comprehension course. We talked about Nishant earlier, the guy who was rejected with a score of 680, got multiple fellowships with a score of 740. He says what you have to realize is that you have enough time to cover all questions. That's really important that each one of you should realize. A lot of you think GMAT's a test of timing. It's not. GMAT's a test of good and consistent method. Can you apply a logical thought process throughout the test and reject answers for solid reasons? Okay. And again, he says take 3+ minutes to read to read and comprehend the passage, or 4+ minutes to read a long passage. When you do that, you can get to the correct answer in 45 to 60 seconds flat. Okay. He did that in a 740 attempt, and you can really see that he was able to answer every question in 2 minutes. Okay. As a guy, Rohit, he's an IAS officer by profession, so he actually is used to a lot of reading overall. And despite that, when he went through what we call as a speed reading approach, he was able to get to a score of less than 50th percentile on the GMAT. But once he learned and applied this methodical approach, he was able to get to a V41. And here is where he said that earlier he had to read the passage multiple times. Why? Because he didn't understand the passage in the first go. But then when he started following reading strategies, he was able to get there, and the need to reread the passage decreased significantly. Okay. And again, as you click on any of these links, for example, if you watch Nishant's interview over here, you'd be able to actually, well, actually these go to Wistia, not to our YouTube channel. You'd be able to watch a bunch more of other interviews on our YouTube channel over here. And he says, what if you still don't get the passage after contributing 4 minutes? There's no reason why you won't, Anish. I think that's kind of where you've got to understand the GMAT's a very well-designed test. And if you follow reading strategies, regardless of the passage type, you're going to get it. Okay. So I understand you've all been there because you've rushed through this. Let me ask this. How many of you who mentioned earlier that, hey, I spend a lot of time reading the passage, extract the amount of information that we extracted from this passage? How many of you do that? How many of you did that prior to this session? Extract the amount of juice that we extracted. Focus on keywords the way we focused on keywords. How many of you did that? In the short answer pod. I know it's been upwards of 3 hours in the session, but no, even though you spend time, not to the extent, right? This is a process. It's not just about reading. It's not just about spending time. It's about reading with a purpose. It's about following certain best practices. And so, yes, I know if you've done that in the past and you felt you didn't understand anything, it's because you did not follow these practices. And also trust me that if you follow these practices, as you read the passage, you'll make sense. There's no reason why you won't. Okay. So how do you do that? How do you build those practices? If you're an e-GMAT student, make sure you go through this master comprehension course. You make sure you go through how a sentence is built. I mean, this is where we teach you an anatomy of a sentence. This is the atomic form, going from an atom to one of the most sophisticated molecules. Think of this module as the same thing, where we talk about the building blocks of sentence and then how do you form long sentences and using those building blocks. So we go from a 2-word sentence to actually a 90-word sentence. By the way, just to tell you how much 90 words is, the longest CR argument is about 100 words. So it's a single sentence is that long. So and we show you how to build those. Why? Because once you know how a long sentence is built, what's the role played by each segment, deconstructing long sentences becomes easier overall, and comprehending long sentences becomes easier. Okay. Then we teach you, when you're reading, where should you pause and comprehend, and that's the 4th module over there. Once you do that, then you go through a bunch of reading strategies files in RC. This is the RC course, which is why you see module 1. And everything that you do is tracked over here, which is where you see these scores that you garnered, because each one of these you get evaluated in these things. And then you go through the main point files. Again, you see the tracking over here. So you get evaluated on those as well. And again, the key thing over here is depth. When you go through these main point files, spend upwards of 30 minutes. Understand what we're talking about. Don't go through this attitude of finishing the course. Okay. And if you need help, write to us. As one of you has said, Bala has said actually, that DJ has been very useful in providing feedback. Yes, we have dedicated GMAT strategy experts who help you with feedback over here. If you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you'd see our students pretty much in every top school. You'll actually see people talk about how they improved on the GMAT. Okay. The key to acing GMAT RC is not solving or not reading a lot or not solving 100 passages, but spending more time on a single passage. And that's something that's really important. The more time you spend on a single passage, the better it is. How many of you have heard this saying? I fear a man, not a man who practices 1,000 kicks, but someone who practices a kick 1,000 times. How many of you have heard this? Okay, yes. I didn't know it was Bruce Lee. It was one of our former students who told me about this in an interview. It just stuck with me. But thank you for educating me. Um, the key to this is, I think the essence over here is about perfection. It's not about doing 100 passages. It's about doing it in such a manner that you perfect it. Once you do that, that's when it starts to make an impact. That's when you get to that top 1 percentile. Okay. And that's the essence that I got out of it. And I've seen that happen hundreds and hundreds of times. When you do that, you achieve that level of excellence that gets you into these top B schools. Okay. So make sure you 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 read each and every passage with that attitude of getting immersed, with that attitude of visualizing everything that you're going to read. Make sure you use these reading strategies as tools to help you get more immersed and help you visualize. Why? Because these keywords help you do exactly that. And then as you practice, and Anish has a great question here, you figure out where you need to put in more effort. Each one of you has certain natural strengths and certain natural weaknesses, and those natural strengths and natural weaknesses go in 2 dimensions. One is, okay, am I weak in certain question types, which is, inference, detail, main point, structure, or parallel reasoning. Or it could also be that certain structures, certain passage types confuse you. So when you practice question and scholarinium, you get that data. The depth of solutions tell you what sentence structures confuse you, and use that data to refine. Without refinement, many of you will remain stuck at the 75th percentile. With refinement, you'd get to that 90th percentile overall. So how many passages do you need? Most of my students who start following this approach get done with this in 30 passages. It's actually the fastest. It's the subsection where the improvement happens, really, really quickly. The first 10 passages are the most challenging. You would hate me for the first 10 passages. Your brain would tell you to give up. But if you sustain through the first 10 passages, if you spend 30 minutes per passage on the first 10 passages, your brain would start loving it. 30, not 300, 30. Okay. And once again, if you need help with study plan, um, here is the link to study plan. I know some of you wanted me to share that link once, but once the session started, you can click on it and reserve a spot over there. Again, you'd work with an expert who will tell you how much effort you'd need in SC, CR, and RC, or various subsections in quant. You'd get those personalized milestones, and then it'll tell you what metrics you need. Okay. All right. And again, make sure you select which issue is the primary area you want to discuss. That way, you work with the right kind of expert over here. Okay. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and I wish you good luck for the session. Let me actually share the PDF with you. If you guys have questions, do write to us, or you can really put those questions in a Q&A pod. I have a question. Does the study planner not tell you your daily goals? No, we are not so much about daily goals. We are a lot more about metrics. Why? Because, as I said, each one of you is different. And this is something that for those of you, how many of you have gone through our brand new quant course? Let me just put a yes no poll over here. How many of you have gone through the new quant course? That's an epitome of that. So for those of you who've seen the new quant course, it's way better than our verbal course, by the way. People are asking us to improve our verbal course along the arc. It's something where where through the entire quant course, you have upwards of 1,000 learning paths right now. So over there, depending on and the beauty of that is that entire quant course is divided into modules. So in number properties, you have even odd as a module, primes as a module, divisibility and remainders as a module, LCM GCD is a module. In each module, you have 9 learning paths. So depending on who you are, there are certain people who take about 2 hours to finish even odd. There are others who take 7 hours. And so that's why we don't like to give you daily goals. Why? Because depending on who you are, this changes. So I know both sections are good. All I'm saying is we've started getting requests for for the verbal course to be now morphed towards in the same architecture as the quant courses, because with the quant course it's a completely different learning architecture that we have. Yes. Where do you get practice passages from? If you're a free trial student, log into your free trial account. You have some practice passages there in Scholarium free trial. If you're a regular student, you have, I think, upwards of 70 to 80 passages in Scholarium in addition to the passages in the course. Okay. All right. Let me just clear the questions that we have over here. Link to tomorrow's quant webinar. Let me actually share the link to that. Thank you for the upcoming sessions. Here's the link to our upcoming sessions over here. So here's the link to Quant Workshop. You should be able to click that over here. And actually, this is an old one. Sorry about that. Yeah, this says November 22nd. Sorry. This is an old pod that is here. Let me get that. I'll have to give you the link to Quant webinar over here. My apologies. By the way, any other questions, do send those over. Here's the link to the Quant webinar. Do I recommend taking verbal first if that's your weak section? Megha, it would depend on you. I mean, there are certain people who really think that they want to get into a momentum, so they want to get done with quant first. It gets them in that high energy mode, and then they like to do verbal. There are others who actually really say no, I want to do verbal first. In principle, this is something that I will tell you that that whatever is your strength, make sure you maximize your performance on that. So if quant's your strength, don't compromise on quant. Okay, so that's the principle that I would say that you should really take. And frankly, if if you're an e-GMAT student, you can simulate. You get the 5 sigma x mocks, but you can actually simulate upwards of another 15 mocks in Scholarium, at least 15 mocks in Scholarium, and so you can train your brain to this degree. Able to schedule the URL is not working. I don't know if we have we only have certain number of slots. If they're all over, then my apologies, but it seems to be working for me. I think there are certain slots which are available on Sunday, about 3 slots available over here. Should you do both quant and verbal daily? Absolutely not. Again, if you're an e-GMAT student, this is something the moment you purchase your course, you're told in the best practices, focus on one subsection. The study planner tells you exactly what you need to focus on and for how long. So So yeah, it gives you a really good estimate. Do not study both daily unless and until you're studying for 5 hours or more every day. In that case, you can study both quant and verbal, but which I don't think most of you would be doing that. All right. With that, I want to thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on egmat.com.